He didn't burn, she whispered. What? Benjen questioned. She turned to face them, her eyes out of focus. He didn't burn, she repeated. I was the first one in and there were flames all over his body. She shook her head in disbelief. I tried putting them out, but there wasn't a mark on him. They stood in silence trying to take in her words. I convinced the guards I had got there in time to shield him. But I didn't. He could tell the thought had shaken her. What if he hadn't been immune to fire? What if I had gone in only to find? But he was. Ned cut in. That is all that matters. He's alive and he's safe. He hesitated for a brief moment, and he is to be the future Lord of Moat Cailin. She turned to look at him, as if judging his declaration, before giving him a nod and slight smile. I will announce it to my lords when they gather in a moon turn. Robert apologized to me for what happened in the capital. He wishes to make amends, so even the crown will not refuse to fund it now, not when there is a perfectly good reason for it after what the Ironborn tried. Nor after I have informed them of what Jon has done. She got up unsteadily, and he wondered when she had last left Jon's bedside at all. I'm going to go to the Godswood to give thanks to the old gods. I think I will sit here a while longer. Daisy Mormont. After Benjen and his brother had left up the tower in a hurry, Lady Stark had briskly sent a maid to show her to her guest quarters. But she had instead questioned the guards on the way to the Godswood. She wasn't even sure why she had offered to tag along with Starks back to Winterfell, but she knew she did feel awful for Benjen Stark. She barely knew him, but from what she did, she knew he was as a good man as she had hoped. Even in the few conversations they had shared, he had spoken so fondly of his nephews and nieces. She could tell he was devoted to them, but none more than little Jon Snow. If there were a chance the old gods would hear her little prayer, she had to try. She stopped abruptly, realizing someone was already there. And just as her luck would have it, she felt the crackling of a leaf under her as she tried to back away. She saw a woman turn to face her. A woman who could only be Ashara Dane. She looked exhausted, with small dark bags under her eyes, and her raven hair was unkempt, but none of that hid her beauty. She had a perfect heart-shaped face and delicate features, unlike Daisy's own long face that had just recently started coming into its own. She realized the woman's violet eyes were staring right at her curiously. My apologies for interrupting your prayer, Lady Dane. I didn't realize anyone else was here. No worries, my lady, she offered easily. I was just finishing and there is space enough for the both of us. And she had to be kind too, Daisy thought a little sourly. No wonder Benjen had been so effusive with his praises of her. It doesn't matter what relationship they had, she decided resolutely, she had come here to pray for his nephew's health only. The poor, brave child who was on the balance of life after such a noble act. She gathered her courage. I had actually come to pray for your son's health. Lord Benjen was rather worried the entire journey. If I may ask, is he going to be all right? He will be, the woman replied, giving her a dazzling smile, and I thank you for your prayers. I appreciate them more than you know. I take it you are Lady Daisy Mormont, then. She looked up in surprise. How did she know? Ben was looking for you, she said softly, as worried as he was about Jon. I haven't seen that kind of smile on his face in the 6 years I've been here. So I'll tell you something, even if he doesn't know it yet, I can tell he likes you quite a bit. I think the two of you would go together rather well. Well, that certainly cleared up her earlier worries, she though seeping with relief, even if the message was about as subtle as a mammoth on a playing field. She did it on purpose, Daisy realized, and she felt a flash of embarrassment that the woman had picked up on her internal struggle so clearly. How many times must other women have grown jealous of her for something she had no control over? Not even mentioning that she was forced to share the castle with a woman who even Daisy could tell openly despised her. It can't have been very easy. I think you two would get along rather well, she remembered Benjen had said. Please just call me Daisy. Ned Stark. He brushed the boy's hair out of his face. Oh, Jon. I can't believe I've failed you so. The thought had been plaguing him the entire ride back. After Benjen had blurted out about a murder attempt on Jon, he had taken his brother aside and forced him to explain everything. Ben had been furious at him after learning the truth of Jon's birth, feeling betrayed that Ned had been about to let him go take the black without ever telling him the truth. As if it was I who told you to join the Night's Watch. He had assumed the occasional anger Ben would show at him in the years after was still because of that. Never would he have dreamed half of what Benjen told had happened the last 6 years. He hadn't expected the life he was giving John as a bastard would be easy. It had been a last resort to keep him safe, but he never imagined John would have deal with all of this. Yet, it made so many things click into place. Ashura's rage at his using Caitlin as a reason for denying John Moat Kaelin for one. He knew they didn't get along. Caitlin couldn't stand the thought of being forced to deal with a woman from his past. She had tried whatever she could to get Rob, Sansa and even little Arya away from their siblings to no avail. He knew she targeted John, who she saw as the biggest threat to her children, and that treatment was something Ashura found unforgivable. But what he learned went beyond simple targeting. Trying to starve him. And a maid trying to drown him. He was just a little boy, how could any human be so cruel? But they are in good hands, Benjen had said. Ashura takes care of everything. She moves her own firewood in John's room when the nights get cold, she sews his clothes together herself, and when he and Lia get upset about not getting desserts she gathers them on her lap and tells them tales of her childhood in Dawn till all I hear is their laughter and excitement. Gods, if it weren't for Ashura, what would John's fate have been? Would he have ever even realized what had been going on had he brought him to Winterfell alone? It was a grace and courtesy he had never known Ashura to possess before, willful and stubborn as she could be. But through all the talks they had shared over the years she had never come to him with any of it, even after everything that had transpired. Did she think I'd let it continue, he wondered, hurt. Sure, his duties kept him far busier than he'd have liked, but she had to know he'd never have stood for anything like that. What was he to even do about this? He had wondered briefly if it would be enough to set Caitlin aside, but that would open a whole new can of worms and anger the Riverlands, perhaps even start a war. He vowed to warn her against interfering in their matters again and ensure she didn't. But beyond that he wasn't sure. By position, the Lady of Winterfell held the right to manage the household staff, but Ned could muzzle her as Ben had urged. But what his brother couldn't understand was that his interference would only make things worse. If all this was what she could do just from John's presence alone, what would she do if he turned her more desperate? You think this is any easier for me? To see how my children are treated, he had told Benjen. Or the woman I love. I took the vows, Ben. I've stayed faithful to Kat. But I will never love her, not like I already love another woman, finally letting himself admit it out loud, a woman I am forced to share this very roof with. Do you know what that's like? Kat must pick up on it as well, she will never get along with them. He brushed his hair back, frustrated. And if I were to interfere any more, she would only take it as further proof of my affections and despise them more. Trouble them more. It won't be long. They will move to Moat Cailin once its reconstruction is complete and John nears an appropriate age. If anything, Ben's eyes had only turned colder. So you will do nothing? That's years away. Spare me your stories of pity, Ned. Just remember to talk to your wife, he said before pushing past him. If you won't protect him, I will, and damn the cost. That had filled him with anger. I have always tried to protect John. He's my son. It was my arms Lyanna laid him in, and it was I she asked to protect him with her dying breath. And a fine job of that you've done so far. Ben had retorted. He felt a tear trickle down his cheek. I failed Lyanna as a brother, and now I nearly failed you as a father as well. Papa, he heard a raspy voice question. You're back. And you're crying. John was finally awake. I've never seen you cry before. Are you all right? I am fine, son, he told the boy, so relieved at seeing him awake he couldn't help but pulling him into a crushing hug. I love you, John. And I won't let anyone hurt you. I love you too, Papa. Notes. Another chapter is in, and this was really one of my favorites to write in the whole story. I spent time having to do some research and learning some interesting things about the Asoyaf world as a whole, and it made me love GRM that much more for creating such detailed world building. The part that always intrigued me about Jon Snow being a Targaryen was him being a part of two separate magical bloodlines and the potential to inherit and combine both gifts. So Jon in this story will eventually get some real development in that area, but it won't be for a long time. Like towards the end of the story long. Most of that is just a vague outline right now. But as you saw in this chapter, he will still make use of it sporadically till then, even if he is as clueless as ever. Next chapter we will get a deeper look into his dragon dreams. As they say, every magic has a price, and it's not only the good parts Jon gets to reap the benefits of, like saving Robb's life, he'll have to deal with the bad parts as well. As always, thank you all for taking the time to read, comment, kudos or any way you interact with the story. I appreciate every one of you. And feel free to let me know of any thoughts, suggestions or advice that comes to mind. Chapter 6, Nightmares. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. 289 AC at Winterfell. Jaime Lannister. Well, here we are, he announced drolly as they set eyes on the castle's grey walls. Dreary place, almost as dreary as the lord who lives in it. He turned to his right. You've met Stark, haven't you, Greyjoy? Cold, sullen, always going on about duty. The boy looked terrified. Oh, don't fret too much now, Honorable Ned Stark wouldn't chop off your head for nothing. Only if your father gives him reason to, he finished with a smirk, trying to take the little enjoyment he could. If anyone wanted to be here less than the Greyjoy boy, it was him. Kingslayer, he bitterly remembered Stark's judgment and how the accursed name had stuck. Fool. If only he knew. But of course that oaf of a king knew that as well, and given how much he hated Jaime, he had delighted in ordering him to be the one to drop the Ironborn in this frozen wasteland. I wonder, would you be as delighted to learn that while you whore and drink away your life, I'm fucking your wife, spilling my seed in her cunt and making whelps that will one day sit in your iron chair? Jaime thought not. The second Robert had gotten word of the reason behind Ned Stark's abrupt departure, he had moaned of sending someone to check up on the boy's well-being, if only in an overbearing attempt to please his recently reconciled friend. If you are trying to curry favor with your friend, Jaime thought snidely, you ought not to send him a prisoner to watch over and perhaps one day be forced to kill. Though, he mused, the king probably had no other real option. Cersei had been wroth that he had dared bring a traitor's son to the capital. She had shouted and screamed of how he would be a terrible influence on her precious Joff till even Jaime grew tired of hearing it before she demanded the boy be kept away from the Red Keep lest he find himself befalling a terrible accident. Robert had clearly taken the warning seriously. His father had immediately petitioned to be the Greyjoy's ward, but Robert had refused that out of plain spite. Jon Arryn served in the capital as Hand of the King, so that was out too. And of course with his enmity with the Tyrells and Martells, he wouldn't have dared given either such a weapon to be wielded against him. The king held little love for his brothers either, Stannis, who also was in the capital as master of ships, and Renly, who was but a boy himself. So he had circled back to his wolf friend. The Lord of Winterfell had gone stiff and cold after being informed, though then again that seemed to be the natural expression his face held, so perhaps he hadn't reacted at all. If Balon rebels again. I know what the duty entails, he had cut Jaime off curtly before they sat in an awkward silence. And where is Lady Dane? Your other ward, he wondered. He had seen many faces flit by through the day, Stark's wife, brother and various of his little pups, but not her. What care is that of yours? Stark questioned suspiciously, as if he thought Jaime would only be good for stabbing her in the back as well, which sent a wave of irritation over him. I'm not the one who killed her brother. Jaime shrugged. I was asked to check on the boy's health and report back, and I assumed the child would be with his mother. He was quite worried, our good King Robert, about his dear friend's son, he said sardonically. And I figured while I was at it, I'd offer my condolences to Lady Ashera on her brother's death. He was my mentor after all, Sir Arthur Dayne. The greatest swordsman in the realm. He didn't bother to hide his satisfaction watching the other man shrink back in obvious discomfort. How many of you did it take, he thought to ask, to finally bring him down? Because it certainly hadn't been one. He could prove as much right now by splitting Stark in half, even if he rid himself of armor. But what good would it be? Sir Arthur Dayne had gotten a death of honor in battle no matter the odds he'd faced, just as a knight of his caliber ought to have. It was more than Jaime would ever get. Stark held out a document for him. What is this? A request of the Crown for a loan for the reconstruction of Moat Cailin. Considering what I'm undertaking for Robert, I'm sure he won't refuse me. A what? Jaime couldn't help but ask. A loan, sir. of 100,000 dragons for the reconstruction of Moat Cailin. I have decided my son Jon is to be awarded the lordship as reward for his actions. 100,000 dragons. Had Stark gone mad? Cersei would never let Robert go through with anything of the sort. Not for Moat Cailin of all places. I'm not your dog, Stark. Send it to him by Raven yourself. No, yet you came here as Robert bid you. So what does that make you? Jaime snatched the documents sharply. The sooner he got out of this wasteland, the better. It should all be in order, and relatively standard. 15 years to repay the full amount. It was all in order, Jaime noted. Though reading through, it seemed a bit too put together than he had ever thought Stark could be. Yet it was written in his hand. Perhaps it had been the work of Lady Dane. You are missing one, he told the man, annoyed. There is no legitimization paper. Ned Stark would need the king to decree the boy a Stark, or more likely a Dane, so he could inherit holdings in his own right. The Danes of Moat Cailin who served the Starks of Winterfell, he'd personally heard of queer things. A strange look entered the Lord of Winterfell's eye at that. There will be no need. He will remain a Snow. A bastard lord. Jaime thought oddly. That was a surprise. Even if the boy wasn't made a Dane or a Stark, custom demanded he take a new name for a new house. But a Snow for a lord. It had never been done before and would certainly earn him little more than mockery in the south. Jaime was hardly going to stick around and insist though, let the king figure it out. As it happened, he did end up running into Lady Ashera Dane not soon after. Sir Jaime, she nodded pleasantly, causing him to pause. It had been so long since he had been called anything but Kingslayer. Her purple eyes were kind, but seeing her unnerved him. Apart from her outburst at the end of the war, he had only met her in passing at King's Landing, both of them nearly the same age when he had arrived to join the Kingsguard and she had come to serve the Princess Elia Martell. Most of what he could recall was her dealing with admirers by the dozens, though he had never paid her much attention. She had been regarded as one of the most beautiful women in court, for good reason, but it was a different Dane that had gotten his undivided attention from the start. There had been only one conversation he could remember them sharing, right after the tournament in Harrenhal had ended and they returned to the Red Keep. 282 AC at King's Landing. Lady Ashera. Prince Rhaegar had welcomed charmingly only to be met with an angry finger wagging in his face. Don't Lady Ashera me, my prince. Her fury had taken him aback. How dare you? How could you shame Elia so? In front of the entire realm, no less. Has she ever given you a reason to shun her, done anything that gave offense? She has kept your counsel, gracefully accepted her duties, birthed your daughter and is now carrying you another heir. My lady, the prince tried to appease. I know how my actions must look, but be assured I meant no disrespect to Elia. There is no need to concern yourself with the relationship between me and my wife. She raised her chin defiantly. You think you are so special, don't you? You spin silky words and your pretty silver hair, but you are no different than most of the men I've had the misfortune to meet in my life. You are too besotted with yourself to give a care how your actions affect others. That is what a good king should always do, or a prince, or any true man. Rhaegar's handsome face had tensed as his eyes narrowed in annoyance. If she hadn't been Princess Elia's closest companion and Arthur's sister, Jaime thought, the prince wouldn't have tolerated her insolence. Sir Jaime the prince had ordered before continuing with Sir Oswell, escort Lady Dane to her chambers. She's in need of rest, and so he had obeyed. The only sound as they walked had been the clanking of his armor echoing in the halls. My mother died in childbirth, she had blurted out to him during the journey back, perhaps as a means of explaining her temporary insanity of confronting the prince. She clearly feared for Princess Elia's poor health as the day for her delivering the child drew nearer, and she blamed Prince Rhaegar for adding to her stress. He nodded, unable to help the curious quiver in his emerald eyes as he admitted, so did mine. She hadn't seemed to fare very well in dealing with courtly games. Too outspoken with a sharp temper to accompany it, yet every time she took a hit she stood right back up and continued to speak her mind again. And her situation definitely had not gotten any better as the Mad King got worse, he thought, regretfully remembering the day Aes had burned the Starks alive. They had both been prisoners of Aes in different ways, something he doubted any of the rest of the people here would truly understand. Lady Dane, he returned the acknowledgement. The king wished for me to convey his regards for your son's actions and health, he said, deciding to get it over with. As if she'd want anything of the sort from the man who had entrapped her here. But that was Robert Baratheon, always pawning off the unsavory tasks like this to him just to relish in Jaime's suffering. Gods, how he hated that oath. He is a brave boy, she said faintly, and I thank the gods every day they've left him healthy and hale. And rewarded with a lordship. Yes, she smiled, Lord Stark was very generous. I couldn't help but find it surprising Lord Stark refused to legitimize him, he asked. He did. Jaime saw her eyes darken in disapproval. Perhaps, she hadn't been involved in any of this at all. Yes, well, I'm sure he didn't wish to dishonor Lady Stark any further, she added bitterly. I'm grateful enough for what my son was given. 6 years in this place sure had changed her, he thought. The king and the Starks had done what even Aerys had never managed. Breaking Ashara Dane. He felt a tinge of pity when he imagined what Sir Arthur Dane would make of his sister's fate. We all have our own paths to travel, Jaime, the man had told him once. I can't stop yours any more than you can mine. And what was his fate? To be known as the Kingslayer, an oath-breaker, for the rest of his life. He wondered while excusing himself to the practice yard while preparations were made for his departure. He felt a warm feeling overtake him as the sword sliced the straw dummy in two. This was what he was meant to do, what he had always been meant to be. But a second feeling interrupted. Irritation. At whoever's eyes had been following him for longer than was proper. If Stark was going to have him watched, he ought to at least get someone who knew how to stay hidden. If you are going to watch, he finally called out, you may as well come out of the bush and get a proper look. Jaime saw someone crawl out awkwardly, one of his arms still in a sling, the other holding a wooden play sword. So this was the bastard then. He looked more a Stark than the rest put together, he thought, smirking when he imagined how that must rile the Lady of Winterfell. What's your name, boy? The child only stared at him with violet eyes that seemed so familiar. Sir Arthur's eyes, he reminded himself, from his mother. Jon Snow, he finally responded. How long were you spying on me? From the boy's blushing face, Jaime would guess quite some time. Do you know how to swing that? Come then, let's see what all your snooping has taught you. Jaime thought the boy might run away, before he managed to gather himself at the last moment, getting into a fighting stance instead. And proceeded to execute the move Jaime had been practicing, flawlessly. Granted, it had been a simple enough drill. A quick sweep upward complemented with a horizontal slash to the chest after drawing the blade back. But the boy hadn't even left a single hair out of place. That was adequate. Yet his words still left the child with a blinding smile. I'm going to join the Kingsguard once I turn 15 like you did. Jaime nearly snorted. Gods, what he would give to see Stark's reaction to that. The man would probably die of a heart attack on the spot, his precious son comparing himself to the honorless Kingslayer. Perhaps, that was the real reason behind the boy's lordship. I'm going to be just as good as Uncle Arthur one day. You will never be Sir Arthur Dane, Jaime nearly told the squirt more than a little bitingly. Sir Jaime, his companion bellowed, making him turn his head, your horse is ready. Good, he didn't intend to stay here any longer than he had to. If you really think so, Jaime decided to humor the child instead, you best be able to do this move. He proceeded to show him one of the more complex moves Arthur had shown him and noted with satisfaction the boy failed miserably at coming anywhere close. It would be easier with my right hand, he heard the boy mutter from behind him as he walked off, but I can still get it. Wait, Jaime furrowed his brow, his smirk dropping, this was the boy's offhand. And the thought came with him all the way till they rode past the walls of Winterfell. Ashara Dane. You think he bought it, she heard Ned ask from behind her. I do. He shook his head. I hardly see the point of that mummus act. Yes, you've mentioned that once or twice, she told him dryly. It had been her who demanded Jon not be legitimized after all, when Ned was about to do so. Unorthodox as it may be, she didn't wish for the realm to know him by a different name. Not as a Stark, not a Dane nor anything new. When the time came they would all know him as a Targaryen alone. A Dragon King. You think the Lannisters are above lying to get what they desire? Let the Kingslayer and the Queen whisper what they will to him, Robert will not turn me down. Perhaps he wouldn't, but she wasn't about to tell him she hardly cared what Robert Baratheon thought, as long as he put his quill on that paper. Let Cersei spin the tale in his ear as being Asherah's plotting if she wished. But she knew Tywin Lannister would want to know as well, and that Jaime wouldn't lie to him. And she fully intended to let him think the Lord of Winterfell shared her aims. Let him know that the entire North has Jon's back. Weeks after Sir Jaime's departure, the order arrived in the King's Seal. She looked at the bold signature, unable to help the smirk that took her. Robert I Baratheon. If only you knew you just signed and funded your own doom, usurper. Don't worry, I will remind you sooner than you think. Everything was going perfectly the way she envisioned, but even that wasn't enough to keep her spirits brightened, not when her son had begun to act so strangely. Have you noticed anything different about Jon? When she'd asked Ned, he'd questioned Jon before he excused it, saying it was only natural for him to be a little jittery after being attacked only moons ago. Benjen shrugged with a frown and informed her Jon's routine hadn't changed. He was still playing with his siblings, sitting in lessons, training and everything else he used to get up to. It was a subtle shift. So subtle, she nearly convinced herself more times than she could count that she'd imagined a problem that didn't exist. He had always been a quiet boy and more than a little shy. But a mother always knows her children. She couldn't help but feel there was something wrong. His face grew a little more pale, the skin under his eyes a little more stretched, and he seemed just more skittish. "Are you feeling all right, Jon?" she'd ask him gently every time. "I'm fine, Mama," he'd reply with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Jon doesn't hide anything from me," she reminded herself, "and he never lies to me. So nothing must really be wrong." But the moons passed and she watched with worry as he became more and more subdued. Catelyn Tully. She sat in disbelief and shock as she heard what her lord husband had declared in front of all his lords in the middle of the feast. The shame of it burned her. Giving the bastard a holdfast, after she'd given him 3 true-born children. And not just any holdfast. Moat Cailin. There were dozens of them in the north to choose from. But she had chosen Moat Cailin. It was so obvious what that scheming Dornish woman was up to, she didn't know why her husband couldn't see it. Moat Cailin had never been taken from the south, and he had given her exactly what she needed to hold the Riverlands out, hold her family out, when she eventually made a play for Robb's seat. "I am with child. I know this time it will be a son." He gave her an odd glance. "What difference does that make?" Was he serious? "You can't give a seat like that to a bastard over your own true-born blood." Jon saved Robb's life. Saved Sansa's life. That is why he is being rewarded with this lordship. "You will ruin this house. Ruin my family, and I will not let you," she confronted the Lord of Winterfell angrily. But he only looked at her as if she were a child throwing a tantrum. "Don't look at me like I speak of something absurd. I'm not a fool, no matter what you or your bannermen may think of me. My father raised me as his heir till my brother was born. I've studied my histories," she shouted. "Look at the number of bastards that have tried to usurp their true-born siblings. Look at what the Black Fyress reaped upon the realm for so many years. There have, my lady," he conceded, "and there have also been even more true-born children who have done the exact same thing when they felt they deserved to be heir over their older sibling. Jon and Robb are brothers, they are wolves, they will never betray each other. And his sons. And their sons after him. The North will bleed for this, and you will make my son pay the price. Asherah would never condone anything of the sort. It will never happen. It's her who is orchestrating the whole thing," Cat wanted to say. "Asherah, Asherah, Asherah," she screamed. "What did that slut do to gain your favor so? Must I also get on my knees and suck your cock like a common whore?" No doubt Dornish are fond of that sort of debauchery, lustful and depraved as they are. "You forget yourself, my lady. Don't ever speak of her in that manner again," he warned dangerously. But what did she care about propriety anymore? Not when he was trying to rip everything away from her. "The shame was on me and me alone, just as it is my decision alone to make Jon a lord." She snorted. Even that simpleton giant Hodder wouldn't have been stupid enough to believe that. "Don't you see what your beloved Asherah is doing? Why, she picked Moat Cailin of all places. You just handed them the key to the entire North. The peace to keep my family out when they try to usurp Rob's place. Usurp, he had the audacity to laugh. You don't know what you speak. Don't I? She challenged. I see how they all treat him. Your household, your lords, and you. How do they treat him? He asked coldly. Not like you tried to, I imagine. Did they not want to starve him, or freeze him, or have maids that tried to kill him? She flushed in anger at the chastisement. Had he not punished her for that already, stripping her of anything resembling responsibility in the castle? They treat him like a Stark. You are in the north, my lady. The blood of the Starks flows through that boy's veins. It's time you accept that. I've put up with everything you've done, my lord. I said nothing while you shamed me by bringing another woman's presence in this castle, while your staff fail to respect my status as their lady, but I won't watch while you treat that boy as Rob's equal. Jon is my son, Catelyn. He bellowed, my blood. He is Rob's equal just as much as any other true-born sons I might have. No, he is not. He is an ill-made. That's enough. I will not hear another word of this. My father won't stand for this. Just because the king is your friend, you think you can do what you please? We are in the north, my lady, he said darkly. Your father holds no power here. Not over me nor mine. If he wishes to address his concerns with me, I will gladly let him know how Jon saved his grandchildren's lives. I will never forgive you, she called out to him. Do what you will, he said unmoving, I won't budge on this. Jon will be lord of the moat, serving under me, and one day under Robb. And just like that it was over. She hadn't seen him since that fight, and he'd kept to his own quarters. It was clear their marriage was done in everything but name. Jon Snow. Come on, dummy. We are going to be late. Lya admonished, though he could tell his twin wasn't really annoyed with him. Her grey eyes were playful and she was sporting a giant grin on her face. Late, he wondered, eyebrows furrowed, for what? Nonetheless, he allowed her to pull him by the hand along with her, observing their surroundings while listening to her happily chatter away. It was a strange place they were in, nothing like Winterfell. In fact, it didn't seem to be in the north at all. The walls were red and covered in paintings of dragons. It was quiet, he realized. Why had Lya stopped talking? He looked down with a confused frown, suddenly realizing his twin's pale hand grasping him seemed to have darkened. When he looked up, he found the girl he was now walking with was not his sister at all. She had olive skin and thick dark ringlets of hair, and he could barely make out the blinding white of her toothy smile. But her eyes, he gasped. They were purple like his and mother's. Come on, Jay, she pulled him into the room in a hurry. He had finally found the owner of the girl's voice. She had talked to him often through his dreams the last few moons, and as vague with her words and abrupt to disappear as she was, he found her a strange comfort in sharing his secrets with her. She was nice and funny, Jon thought, not quite as bold or demanding as Lya could be, yet still protective of him, having helped him escape from multiple of his nightmares with her timely whispered advice. But this was the first time he'd had anything to refer to more than a voice. This was the first time he'd actually seen her face. We have to hide from the bad men. We will be safe here, she told him wide-eyed as she helped him crawl under the bed with her. Papa will come for us on a dragon, and we already have Balerion too, she said proudly, lifting up a black cat. He didn't understand. Were they supposed to be playing hide and seek? And who was her papa, and how could he have a dragon? The dragons were all dead, Mama had said so once during her stories. Unless she was just talking about him having a cat too. The whelp is in here, he heard a shout from outside the door, and he nearly jumped out of his skin as he heard a loud thump against the door. They were trying to break it down, and they sounded rather violent, he thought while his heart pounded. Don't worry, Jay, she soothed, gently stroking his arm, I'll protect you. Always. A little relief took him at that. She'd helped him escape so many times before, she could surely help him out of this one too. He closed his eyes, cowering in his corner as the banging got louder. Why did they always want to hurt him? What had he ever done to them? He only opened his eyes as he heard the door finally give out with a bang, shivering in fear as a pair of beady black eyes dropped to his level and stared right at him. Don't hurt me, he wanted to beg, please. Jon tried desperately to back away as the fat man reached a meaty hand out to him, only to realize with a shaky breath that it moved right past him. Let me go. "Papa, help me," came a high-pitched squeal. "Mandir!" John saw her screaming, crying and kicking as the man dragged her out by her foot. "No!" John cried out, "No! Leave her alone!" But his arm seemed to only go straight through the man when he tried to push him away. John froze at the cruel look in the attacker's little pig eyes. "Good night, princess," came his thin, evil voice, and John could only look on horrified as he drove down a knife into her and heaved it up again, sending hot blood gushing through his fingers in squirts. He backed away pale-faced, wanting to sob. "Someone has to help her." John felt a pull on his tummy at the sight of the red collecting in a puddle on the floor by Mandir's legs, and he leaned on his knees trying to stop himself from throwing up. Suddenly a flare of pain erupted through his chest, as sharp as he remembered his shoulder wound had been. He looked down, seeing the spot grow slick with blood. Every time the evil man stabbed Mandir's lifeless body, he felt another gash of hurt. John screamed as his vision turned blurry from pain as the man continued to cleave down with another 100 thrusts. Mandir's face came into his head again, and she looked at him with so much sorrow before whispering again, "I'll protect you, Jay, always." "John," he heard someone shaking him desperately, "John! Get up!" He gasped with a howl, still feeling the needles stabbing down at him. "Rob?" he asked, teary-eyed. It hurts." He managed to get out from his tightly cramping body. Had he actually been stabbed? "I'll get help," his brother said. "Stay here." Ned Stark. He burst through the brush, chasing the white outline at his front, finding himself unable to catch up. Winter, the horse was called, and he'd ridden her all the way down from Dawn, unable to leave her behind. Lionel's horse. Though no longer. The courser was pale as the snowfall she galloped on, unique compared to her peers at Winterfell. He remembered his daughter's wonderment the first time she had laid eyes on the beautiful horse with a silky coat of pure white. It had been love at first sight. It felt like it was just yesterday he had taken a 4-year-old girl for her first ride on that horse, snuggled at his front. "Can we come back tomorrow?" Lyra had asked, nuzzling her head into his chest, and when she turned those grey eyes up to look at him pleadingly, he had nearly given in to her charm. But he had responsibilities too, those to the entire North. "Another time." He laid a kiss on the girl's brow, not wanting to see her face fall. "But Winter will miss me, Papa," she pouted. "I know she will. She's all alone and she liked me. She will like you then too, I promise." And now here she was waiting on him. "I beat you." His daughter was practically jumping in her excitement. For a girl of not even 7, Ned thought, she was already an impressive rider. "You did," he smiled down at her. "Still, you ought to go a little slower for now. If you get thrown off, your mother would kill me." "Winter wouldn't do that to me." She looked at him in confusion. "Not on purpose, no. But you are small still, Lyra. Winter doesn't know her own strength." He frowned when he saw his daughter wince at the name. "You don't like being called Lyra?" "It's a boring name," she complained. "I want to be called Ly, but Mama won't listen," she sculled. "It was your grandmother's name." He reminded her gently, "My mother's name." Lyra flushed in guilt for a second before her lips pouted lovably. "Mayhaps it was a less boring name on her, Papa," she suggested innocently, and he found himself laughing. "As you say. Ly." "My lord," he heard an urgent shout, and they found themselves turning the approaching guard. Whatever it was, it didn't promise to be good. Ned walked in, leaving Ly waiting out with Rob, who had met them talking of an attack of some kind. He saw Ashura comforting John, who looked on the verge of hysterics. "I can't take it anymore," he admitted with a sob. "It's awful. I just want it to end. I don't want to see them hurting anymore. I don't want to feel this anymore, Mama, I don't want to feel anything." He covered his eyes tightly as if that would make everything go away, and Ned felt a sliver of panic. What had happened to leave him in such a state? "I'm so sorry, sweeterling. If I could take this pain away from you, somehow, I would never rest till I do. But even though I cannot, I know you can take it. You are the strongest person I know." He watched as she relieved Maestillowin of the concoction in his hand as he approached the bed. "Here, John, drink this. It will let you sleep." His son took the cup shakily, taking in the contents in a quick gulp. "I'll be right by your side, and I won't let any monsters near you." "Monsters?" "All night, he gulped. All night, she assured. He approached the bed as the boy slept and Ashura laid a hand on him before putting a finger to her mouth, gesturing for silence. He let her lead him to her solar before she locked the solar door. What's going on, Ashura? A nightmare, she said simply, that someone was trying to hurt him, and ended up hurting someone else. He knew that look in her eye well enough to know she knew more than that. Who? He said. The girl he was with was called Mandir. You know that name? I've heard it before, she answered rather shakily. It's not a name. When I was at court and Elia was pregnant with baby Egon, little Rhaenys always said she'd have to protect him because she was Egon's Mandir. It's High Valyrian for big sister. You think the girl was Rhaenys Targaryen? She nodded. Some other things he said too. The man he described, short, fat, beady eyes and wearing black on red, it describes Amory Lorque. He remembered the man from King's Landing. One of the men suspected of murdering the little princess. He said other things too. That it wasn't just an ordinary dream. She's been talking to him for a while. Talking to him? It's a dream, Ashura. He said she called him Jay no matter how much he insisted his name was John. That's strange. But if it was only a dream, who attacked him? I don't think he was attacked. Rob's but a boy himself. He just saw John dreaming after falling asleep because of his tiredness. There's no marks or bruises, he wasn't taken. If someone knows. No one knows, she insisted. And there's more. He's been having them for 6 moons now. The first one was the night he saved Rob. He dreamt about it. Ned hadn't know what to say to that, but he walked over with her as she went to see Mayor Stillowin. How often can he take it safely? He's been having these nightmares every day. If I were to need more in the future, I just want to know, can he get addicted to it? Mayor Stillowin looked to be thinking, for a boy his age, if you stick to the amount I gave today, 2-3 times a week should be perfectly fine, my lady. Would you be able to make another batch, Maester? Of course. It's better than milk of the poppy, she told him, not looking particularly happy about it, but I would rather it didn't become a habit. I'll stay by his side for a while just to keep an eye on him. Jon Snow. Ever since the time he'd saved Rob, the nightmares had come for him every night. It had been hard keeping it a secret, not with how Arya had taken to following him around everywhere and since Rob had started to spend even more time with him, as much as Lyak. Mother had been suspicious too, he knew, and sometimes he came so close to telling her everything. But how could he tell her he heard voices? That he saw all these things. Rob didn't have nightmares anymore and neither did Lyak. Sansa did, but she was a baby, she was still only 4. If Mother knew how strange and odd he was, Jon knew she would feel bad. Maybe she'd even be ashamed. But he couldn't help panicking after what happened yesterday, and he had ended up telling her everything. He thought back to the conversation he'd had with her last night. How long have these nightmares been going on? She had asked him sternly. 6 moons. 6 moons. He had seen the exasperation on her face. Jon. You haven't been able to get a single night of peaceful sleep in 6 moons and you never came to me once. Why? I didn't want to bother you, he claimed hesitantly, but her eyes narrowed and he knew she could tell he was lying. Luckily, she had let it go. I am your mother. You are never a bother to me. The next time you cannot sleep, promise me you will wake me up. I promise. Good. The whole castle knew now, he realized, unable to help the flush of embarrassment. He walked in watching Lya and Rob playing a game of Sivas. It was an old set, one of the few things Mother had brought with her from Dorne when she had come north with him and Lya. Neither of his siblings were very good at it, at least from what he could tell, but considering how competitive they both were, rarely did a game end without a fight. Death in 3, his sister declared triumphantly. Hey! You can't do that. Rob said, affronted. An elephant can't remove a dragon, only a catapult or a tray bucket can. Lya narrowed her eyes in a frown. Why shouldn't they? Elephants are huge and dragons don't even exist. Because those are the rules, Lya, Aunt Ash said so. Well, I say they can, Rob. You've never even seen an elephant, so how do you know they exist? Jon was interrupted from watching their argument, when a hand touched his back, making him jump in fright. It was Theon Greyjoy, father's new ward. Jon didn't like the older boy much, finding him rather mean and rude the majority of the time. "Says no, want to play a real game?" he asked the finger dance. Before going on to describe a game where one person throws a hand axe and the other has to either catch it or jump over it, only ending when someone loses at least one finger. That sent an uneasy feeling through him as he remembered the image of Mandir, who Mother had revealed was really Princess Rhaenys Targaryen, with blood dripping out of her body. Not to mention that while Theon claimed he'd played it before, Jon could tell he was lying. That doesn't sound very fun. He saw the older boy's eyes darken at response. "Fine. I was doing you a favor. Maybe if you toughened up a bit, your mother would really love you. How could anyone love someone so weak? She feels pity for you. That's all. They all feel pity for you." "That's not true," he mumbled in disagreement. "Mother loves me. Father loves me. Ly, Robb, Sansa and Arya all love me." Theon gave a harsh bark of laughter, then adopted a high-pitched, whimpering voice. "I heard you whimpering. Mama help me. Papa help me. They are going to hurt her. It's pathetic." Jon felt himself going pale. "If there were any children like you in Pike, we'd leave them for the drowned god to take." He felt his arms shaking. "They all know," he panicked, feeling the sweat gathering on his face. "They all know." Suddenly, Lyra was at his side, her arm curled protectively around him. "Leave him alone," she hissed at Theon. "It's not Jon's fault that no one loved you enough to keep you at your home. That they threw you out here instead like a dog they didn't want anymore." That was the harshest he'd ever heard Lyra speak to anyone before. She had a gift of making friends with both servants and nobles alike as easy as breathing air. Theon burned at her words. "You bastard bitch. That's my sister you are insulting." Robb growled at him in warning. Even Arya was glaring at him with all the anger a girl of 3 could muster. "I am a Greyjoy, heir to the Iron Islands. I will not take this from some bastard girl. Grey or white, a wolf is a wolf, Greyjoy," Robb told him, "and you are not." Whatever the older boy got up to leave. "I just said what everyone else here isn't willing to say." "Are you all right, Jon?" Robb questioned kindly, and he saw Lyra turned to him in concern. He was right, Jon thought miserably. "I am pathetic. But Mother still loves me because she's the best person in the world. She deserves better. I want to be the son she deserves." Ashura Dane. Ashura did what she always did when she had questions. She turned to books. She had found there was rarely ever a question that someone had never run into before, and the one thing she loved of Winterfell was its library tower. It must have been one of the biggest in all the kingdoms, far larger than the collection staff all had to offer. In the Age of Heroes, the kings of Winter focused their efforts on gathering magic, the easiest method of which they found was by marriage into the right bloodlines. At the war for Sea Dragon Point, after the Starks brought down the Warg King and his inhuman allies, the Children of the Forest, all his sons were put to the sword, along with his beasts and greenseers, whilst his daughters were taken as the prize of their conqueror. When the last of the Barrow Kings submitted to Winterfell, the Stark King demanded his daughter in marriage, a maid known for her green-seeing. The skin-changing bit sounded an awful lot like the connection Targaryens had to their dragons to Ashura, what with the telepathic connection with animals. But it was the mention of green sight that drew her attention. Prophetic dreams. It was what made sense. What Jon had described, the death of little Rhaenys, and finally admitting to how he saved Robb, it was all coming together. But Stark blood wasn't the only powerful magic running through him, she thought, peeking at the other scroll. Dragon dreams are no ordinary dreams. Throughout history, they appear to those with a premonition-like dream ability. The most famous of them was Daenerys the Dreamer, who correctly foresaw the doom of Valyria, which took with it all the Dragon Lords, save the Targaryens. But it wasn't always quite so much fun for those who bore them. The dreams have haunted those with the blood of the dragon throughout the generations, some more than others. Take Daeron Targaryen, eldest son of Kingmaker I Targaryen by his wife Dany Dane, one of the rare Targaryens actually recorded to have experienced the prophetic dragon dreams. He infamously claimed to Sir Duncan the Tall that a great red dragon would fall on him dead, but the knight would walk off alive, unknowingly offering a metaphorical prediction for the death of Prince Baelor, his uncle. Daeron's dreams extracted a heavy toll from the prince, driving him to alcoholism. He was often described as a sad creature, sallow, carrying bloodshot eyes with an unhealthy cast to them, and a sheen of sweat always covering his brow and shaking hands. "My dreams are not like yours, Sir Duncan. Mine are true. They frighten me." "You frighten me," he once claimed. The fear made him throw himself into hawse and drink, hopeful for any distracting feeling that would let him forget. It is believed Arion the Monstrous, like his older brother, was also plagued by dreams, though this was never confirmed. He was a crueler sort of man, vain and wicked, so he dabbled in the black arts to try and ease his pain. It didn't work. The dreams progressed and he found himself sure he was a dragon in human form. He grew obsessed over this destiny foretold by his visions, convinced it was the path to ending the dreams and fulfilling his full potential. In the end, Arion Brightflame, as he would be known, died screaming after consuming a cup of wildfire for that very purpose. She skimmed over the rest, seeing nothing particularly noteworthy, or at least nothing different from what she already found. One became a frightened drunkard and the other even more of a madman than he already was. And in just about all the cases, their fear gave way to desperation and then eventually obsession. Often about dragons, it looked like. "I mean, just look at this demon too, Blackfyr," she thought. "I would make you mine own man, and raise you high. My dreams do not lie, Sir Duncan. You will have that white cloak, and I must have the dragon's egg. I must, my dreams have made that plain." If that wasn't obsessed, she didn't know what was. None of the cases seemed quite as bad or frequent as John's, she thought with a frown, but then again it wasn't like they had a personal diary to go off of. These weren't exactly the details that would be available to any Maestas observations and write-up. Perhaps it was the combination that did it, the magical propensity of his wolf's blood altering his dragon dreams. She couldn't help but wonder how much of the disposition for Targaryen madness might simply come from those who were more highly sensitive to these dragon dreams. After all, she could imagine how getting terrifying visions and dreams one's entire childhood might hold sway on young, developing minds, especially if it meant being deprived of regular sleep. Suddenly her eyes caught sight of the final passage under the entry of Arion Brightflame. Perhaps he thought he would really transform into a dragon, or perhaps he hadn't cared either way. As long as the pain ended. She felt her chest tighten involuntarily as she digested the final sentence. The words had struck a chord. "I just want it all to end," her son had said. "I don't want to feel anything. No, that will never be how it ends. This won't be his fate," she willed. "I won't let it. Now that I know the problem, I will find a solution and nip this in the bud." But the weeks dragged on and nothing they could do seemed to make any kind of difference. Ned had taken him riding along the woods, hoping the fresh air would help him fall asleep. Benjen had bought him a fiddle, thinking the calming music would prove the difference. As it turned out, John loved playing the instrument, and he was far more gifted at it than any of them were, but it did nothing to solve his sleeping problem at all. The only thing that provided him any measure of relief was the dream wine. But even the old doses weren't enough to put him to sleep. He kept asking for more and more every time, only to still get up at odd hours. Maester Lewin had already floated the suggestion that moving him to the stronger milk of the poppy may be their only choice. A bout of helplessness took her, that John had to continue to cope with this alone while she could do nothing more than watch his slowly made descent. And that frightened her more than anything ever had before. "Not even you can change the wheels of fate, sweet sister," Arthur had told her once. "Watch me," she had replied stubbornly. Perhaps her brother had been right, she thought now, weary. What could she possibly do against something like this? "I don't know what to do about him," she broke down with a hitch as he locked the solar door. "I'm scared, Ned," she admitted. His eyes were tight with concern, but he comforted her nonetheless. "It's just nightmares. He's had a tough few months, but we will figure something out, Ash. Something to help him face it," he assured. "No, you don't understand," she hissed. "It's blood magic. They aren't just nightmares, they are visions of the past and the future. Dragon dreams and maybe Greensight too." He didn't look very convinced, even when she showed him all the readings. "You told me Stark blood was different too," once she reminded him. "The blood of the first men, but a particularly strong connection, that of Greenseers, skin changers and wargs." He frowned. "Compared to others, I suppose. There have been records and stories," he agreed tentatively, "but a Stark hasn't been one of those in generations." Hundreds of years, likely. I'm not. Lyanna wasn't, as far as I know. Ben isn't. But it would make sense, she argued. You think he gets dragon dreams from the blood of old Valyria and they are being mutated through green seeing? Ash, even if those legends are all true, the chances of activating one of those abilities must be minuscule, let alone both together. Stark and Targaryen blood haven't ever joined before, she emphasized. The two most magical bloodlines known to man. What if it's too much, she finally confided. What if he becomes a drunk scared of his own shadow like Daeron Targaryen? She couldn't find it in her to say, or worse, a madman, like Aerys. He's my boy, she had nearly wept in front of the weirwood only hours ago, my sweet, compassionate boy. She thought of how he'd give that little smile when he snuck his cream cakes to Lyra, just because he knew how she liked them, and saw her bite into them joyfully. How he'd come to her and tug her arm so warmly whenever he saw her eyes dull until she couldn't help grin back at him. It would be the cruelest jape the gods had played on her yet to have him suffer a fate like that. Jon will not go mad, Ned said firmly, giving her shoulder a squeeze. He dealt with this for 6 months on his own. But he won't ever have to do that again. We are all here for him now. He will get through this, you will see. She awoke drowsily at the vague sound of screaming. Jon, she bolted up immediately, rushing to his room. He was trembling, she noted with concern as she opened his door and moved to his bed. She rushed to her son before kneeling and hugging him close. Mama. Jon, my love. What's wrong? He buried his face in the fabric of her nightgown, taking comfort in the familiarity of her scent. I can't sleep, he responded in a muffled whisper. It was a nightmare again, wasn't it? He poked out of her grasp, nodding while his dark curls bobbed and his purple eyes shined with unshed tears. Was it the same one? He shook his head and she nearly sighed in relief. It disturbed her beyond measure that he had been forced to see Rhaenys' horrifying murder multiple times, among other things just as bad. She remembered how haunted Ned had been at just seeing the bodies left behind, and he was a grown man. Oh my darling, what did they do to you this time? I don't want to talk about it, he muttered, barely louder than a whisper. He had been unwilling to share any of the nightmares or information with her after that day, or with anybody else for that matter, and she had initially let it go, but perhaps now it was time to force his hand. She scooped him up onto her lap at the edge of the bed before slowly encouraging him with a smile. Then you don't have to, she told him softly, but if you want to tell me about it, I'll be happy to listen, you know that, right, sweeterling? It might even make you feel better. He sat in contemplative silence for a few moments before giving it a try. I was here, in the castle, and Jon bit his lip, and you and Lyra weren't there. It was horrible. I kept asking everyone where you were and they kept looking at me like I was crazy. Like they didn't know you at all. And in the end I went to look in the crypts. He was starting to sniffle. They told me I didn't belong there, that there was no place for me there, and I had to go away. Who told you that? He wiped at his eyes furiously. The Stone Kings on their thrones. They got up from their graves and tried pulling me down with them, and then they started ripping me apart limb by limb. It hurt so much, I could feel it, he admitted with a quiver, which had explained his screams. I called for Father and Uncle Benjen and Rob, but they didn't help, none of them. They just stared at me, watching quietly like they didn't care. And then I kept calling for you, but you never came, he accused fearfully. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, and he wept bitter tears while once again joining in her embrace. Shush, it's all right darling, she assuaged. It still hurts, he begged, grabbing at his arms with difficulty. Can I have the medicine? For a second she didn't understand his meaning. Then it dawned on her, he wanted dream wine again. I don't want to feel anything, the words echoed in her head. She pursed her lips. As much as she hated seeing him in pain, she had already given him nearly double the allowed dose of it for yesterday's nightmare. Also, he could even manage 4 hours of sleep before getting up once more. It can't continue, she told herself, not like this. Let's try something else first, shall we? If you still need it to sleep after an hour, I'll let you have it then, she bargained while patting the space next to her. Come, you can sleep in my bed tonight. He ducked his head in acceptance and clung onto her arm tightly as if he feared she would disappear were he to let go. She caressed his back slowly in an attempt to ease his breathing, before taking him to her new room. She'd moved to the room to the right of his after that night just to make it easier to check on him. It was slightly smaller than the normal ones, being on the edge of the tower, but the lengthy window more than made up for it. 6 months of this, she remembered Ned's words. He'd been going through this nearly every night for so long without her having a clue. It frustrated her, it made her feel like a failure of a mother that he'd been left to his suffering alone all this time. And even the past 2 weeks that she had known, he still wouldn't come to her about it on his own, it was always her having to check on him. "You lied to me, John," she said more forcefully than she intended once she had closed the door. Yet she found she couldn't help it. He always told her the truth before. He dropped his head in shame and she saw his little palms pale. "You promised you would come to me if you had any more dreams that didn't let you sleep, and I want to know why you haven't been." She could feel her voice straining with distress. "Do you know how worried I've been?" "That's why I didn't tell anyone," he shouted, quavering, "because I didn't want you to feel bad. I didn't want you to know that you have such a freak for a son." A freak? She could only stare at him open-mouthed after the outburst. "What's wrong with me?" he pleaded so desperately that she felt her heart break. "There is nothing wrong with you." His mouth was shaking and he started to gasp, having run out of breath. "It keeps happening. I don't want it to. But I can't stop it. I'm a freak. I'm my son," she said strongly, reaching out to put her hand on his shoulder. "That is what you are, John. You are not a freak, you are my son. And I never want to hear you call yourself that again." How could she explain it to him without giving away too much? Sometimes, the gods bless those they deem special with magic powers, something most little boys and girls can only dream of having. You are one of them. "I don't want to be special." The tears were glistening in his eyes. "I just want to be normal. If you weren't such a special boy, your brother would not be alive right now." He went silent at the reminder, eyes focused on his feet, and she sighed. "I know you didn't ask for this, but you must stay strong," she urged him encouragingly. It will not always be so bad. You will help people with it one day, more people than you can imagine. So do you think you can do that, for me?" "I'll try," he whispered with a doleful sniff, leaning against her chest. She looked up at the moonlight that was falling in and illuminating the room, and a sudden inspiration hit her. It was a stupid idea really, something her mother had used to comfort her when she was a little girl afraid of the dark, not dealing with anything nearly as awful as these visions of blood magic. But she had to try something different anyway, she told herself, so why not this? It had worked for her once after all. "Do you know how much I love you, John?" she breathed quietly in his ear once he was settled into the bed with only an infrequent whimper now that she cuddled snugly behind him. "More than all the stars in the night sky," she said, pointing to them outside of the window. "My mother used to tell me, the thing about stars is that when you are lost you can always use them to find your way back home." She pointed out the constellations to him she had always favored, the King's Crown, the Ice Dragon, the Galley, and watched as his eyes slowly grew drowsier as he counted them with her. "And you see that one? It is the Sword of the Morning," she said warmly, pointing at the assortment of stars hanging towards the south, the white star in its hilt looking especially bright tonight. "As long as it remains in the sky, you can rest assured the greatest knights of Starfall are watching over you, including your Uncle Arthur. They won't ever let anything happen to you. And neither will I." She slipped out her brooch made of pure silver molded in the shape of the falling star of House Dane, something she had till now never let out of her possession, and thrust it into his tiny palm. It was the very same one her mother had given her all those years ago. "I want you to have this. I don't know why you were lost from me in your dream. But I want you to know that, you are my home, John. So keep this with you, keep it close, and I promise I will always be there for you through your darkest roads and your most terrifying dreams." He let out a calm breath as he keenly observed the ornamental piece she'd placed in his arms. "I'm sorry," John finally murmured hoarsely. She furrowed her brows confused, whatever for? He looked defeated. I just want to be strong like Rob and Liak. If there's nothing really wrong with me, it means I'm just weak, and I don't want to be weak." He was blinking back tears. She frowned at his words. "You are not weak," Theon said. "I am." "Don't listen to that Greyjoy boy, listen to me. She tucked her hand under his chin, forcing him to face her. What you deal with, it is not easy, but you still face it with grace, and I think that makes you really brave. If you ask me, neither your brother nor sister could ever manage to handle it like you do, not for so long. But they still scare me. She raised an eyebrow. Do you remember what your father said about that? John nodded dutifully. He said there's no shame in fear, what matters is how we face it. That's right. So you aren't disappointed in me? He checked with her hesitantly. That I'm not, a better son, he trailed off in a whisper. Theon said if anyone had a son like me in the Iron Islands they would leave me for the drowned god. Anger blazed in her at her son's words. So that's who had been putting all these ideas in his head. I'll deal with Greyjoy later, she promised. She smiled at him playfully and kissed the top of his head. Well, I promise not to drown you, she purred while creeping toward him slowly, and I happen to think you are perfect just the way you are, she finished, pouncing on top of him. Would you look at that, a star that caught a wolf pup. I thought it was supposed to be the other way around. That brought a giggle out of him and he snuggled closer to her, letting out a yawn. Good night, Mama, he muttered in a lull. She brushed a tear stain off his cheek. Good night, my little star. She watched with a hint of hope as he finally drifted off to sleep. It worked, she thought excitedly after watching him for an hour. He's not waking even without a drop of dream wine. She'd still been hesitant to believe it for certain, but for whatever reason, from then on, the routine seemed to work. He'd awaken from his aches and dreams and come to her room, and together they would name all the stars they could find. Then when he'd finally doze off against her in the middle, she'd lift him into her bed with his silver brooch still clutched in hand, and cover him with furs before rolling in beside him, finding he wouldn't arise again till morning. The weeks passed, and slowly but surely, the color started to return to his cheeks and he looked as hale as ever. Notes. Another chapter is in, let me know what you guys think. We also got a first look at Jaime Lannister. I don't know fully what I intend for his role to be, even if he won't show up again till we reach the start of canon, so if you guys have any preferences let me know. As always, thanks for reading, kudos, subscribing or any other way you interact with his story. Chapter 7, Surprises and Reconciliation. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Ashara Dayne in a red dress. 291 AC at Winterfell. Ashara Dayne. 7 years. 7 years to the date since she had moved to Winterfell with Lyra and Jon. It hadn't been one of her good months, she thought with a grimace. She'd struggled with stretches like this over the last few years, where she was left with nothing but feelings of gloom and an urge to finally give up on life. Not yet, she'd counsel herself angrily while curled in her bed, not till the Lannisters and Baratheons are gone and Elia is avenged. But this time was by far the worst. It came with an aching loneliness, a plague of insomnia that left her laying in her bed awake thinking of Arthur, of Elia and all the other ghosts that haunted her past. More than anything, it left her missing home. The feel of the sand on her toes, the smell of the sea breeze from her high tower, the striking warmth of the sun and even the view of the Red Mountains from the edge of Starfall. She'd grown to like the north and its rigid beauty, but she was a Dornish woman. She thought of sweet little Illyria, who would be closer to a woman grown than the small child she had last seen her as. Of her stern older brother and his lovely innocent wife. Would they have had children of their own by now? A niece or nephew, maybe a couple of both, that she'd never met. She didn't say as much as a word, tried not to act even the slightest bit different as she disguised her melancholy, but she could tell Jon was starting to notice. Benjen was coming to take her through Moat Cailin to observe the progress they had made so far. That was the exact kind of distraction she needed. I just have to push through a little more, she told herself, and I'll be back over it like usual. 291 AC at Moat Cailin. You know, Ben grinned, while wrapping her in a hug. If Robert Baratheon found out you were here, I'd have to give him your head. That was right, she smiled, she was finally out of Winterfell, no matter how briefly. I'd best enjoy my last moments of freedom while I can then, she told him with a laugh. How is our dear Lady Mormont faring? Apologies, Lady Stark, she teased. Ben and Daisy had married in Winterfell's Godswood barely 6 moons after the Ironborn Rebellion before heading back to Bear Island. They split their time since then between the ancestral seat of the Mormonts and Winterfell, the latter from which Benjen would leave to oversee the construction of Moat Cailin for Jon while Daisy would stay behind to keep her company. She had honestly been surprised at how quickly they had grown into fast friends, but Daisy had an awkward charm about her that Ashura couldn't help find endearing. The younger woman was straightforward and open, which she much appreciated, yet still quite sharp and bubbling with curiosity. They had spent hours on end talking of Ashura's old life in the south, and Daisy had been eager to learn more about Dawn and the capital and how it compared to Bear Island. She'd in turn regaled Ashura in tales of her and her sister's youthful adventures. She had found herself missing both of them dearly when they were gone despite their frequent visits. Another year and construction will be complete. I will take over as Castellan as soon as that happens, until John is of age as we planned. You know, you and Daisy are always welcome to stay permanently. There is a lot of land to pass out after all. That is, if Ned hasn't already approached you about settling Queen's Crown like he wanted to. He gave a thankful nod. I know, and I definitely wouldn't need a lordship to stay. But I think Daisy expects to continue as Master-at-Arms in Bear Island like her mother used to be. You know, the simple life. Consider it at least, will you? It would be nice having some family close. Of course. I'll talk it over with her, though that problem is many years away. You ought to take the offer back now, he joked. Daisy might just move in the first she is able, with how much she's griped of missing having you around whenever we are away. Good, she shot back with a smile. We'll make sure to chain you in place so you cannot go running off as you have been. It feels like I've barely caught sight of you this last year. He only smiled in silent apology. So how has Bear Island been treating you? It is a rather modest living, truth be told. But I've come to like it. The Mormonts have been very welcoming, Lady Mage and all my good sisters. Lord Jorah is a rather gracious host, if a little odd. Odd. It's nothing crazy. You know he married Lioness Hightower, right? Well, let's just say she's, not used to a modest living. She hasn't been very happy there, and Lord Jorah seems a tad too desperate to make that change. Ashura winced, sympathizing with the woman's plight. It wasn't an easy change coming here from the south to start with, and if Bear Island was as bare as Ben claimed, it would make the transition that much harder, especially for a daughter of House Hightower, probably the most powerful house in the realm. I was actually wanting to talk to you about that, he started a little hesitantly. What do you think of John and Lyra fostering in Bear Island for a short while? She felt her blood run cold at his words. No. She nearly said forcefully. John and Lyra were like a lifeline to her happiness trapped in Winterfell. Every moment she watched them playing or training, every laugh she heard and every cry she comforted, she needed it all like a fish needs water. They love their siblings and father, she told herself in an attempt to assuage her own guilt. They want to stay too. Without me, I presume, she questioned him quietly. Ben's eyes tightened. I asked Ned for leave to take you too. It isn't like you aren't going to come with John to Moat Cailin in a couple years anyway, but he refused. He says that was approved by Robert, but you are to remain a ward of Winterfell until then, lest the king get word and demand your head. The status of her wardship was up in the air, to say the least. She would remain one, of course, that much was certain. But they had taken Robert Baratheon's approval of the lordship to mean when John finally moved to Moat Cailin, she could be his ward instead. Why Ned lives in fear of that I don't know. Baratheon will never hear word of it. The North remembers, and they are loyal to the Starks alone. And even if he did have the audacity to make the demand, he can do nothing to enforce it. Not here. It's all right, she told him kindly. I appreciate the attempt at any rate. She mulled over the decision. Practically it was the best move. It would be good for them to build relationships with other houses in the north. But she couldn't get the words to come out. Can I think about it? Of course. They had met with the largest lord currently ruling the grasslands. He didn't seem all that enthusiastic of his new overlord to Ashura, which left her stewing in dissatisfaction, but Ben assured her they could be brought to control. He certainly hadn't been wrong with calling them a tribe, she thought. There couldn't have been more than 300 or 400 people, which as it stood currently served as the majority of the population of her son's subjects. The Lord Dunquil and his forefathers had lived on the land for thousands of years, even back to when the original Moat Cailin still stood tall. Their castle was in truth a simple home of rock covered in animal pelts, which she assumed kept the warmth in, no different than the dozens of others apart from being slightly larger. The majority of inhabitants didn't even bother with the stone homes, deciding that wrapping animal skins around wooden poles seemed to provide a flexible enough living space. Their living style seemed heavily connected to the surrounding fauna, considering they tamed the wild horses, hunted the sheep, cows and bulls, and generally moved with the herds. Ned, Benjen and her had decided to divide the lands into 5 territories, the 4 surrounding ones for which they would have to find lords to serve under John. The northmost of these territories they had pronounced would remain with the natives under the Dunquils, letting them retain a large amount of their current freedom. She expected their skill at taming and breeding the horses would come to use soon enough, as the heavy and strong stallions would make a perfect export to the south. After all, knights were always in need of quality steeds. That boy, the lord's son, she asked, he's what, around 3 and 10 by the looks of it. We could foster him at the moat when John finally moves in. Ben grunted in agreement. That would be smart. Sinan, I believe the boy's name is. Seemed like a laid-back sort. Disgruntled lords could be handled, but they had found themselves with more serious issues. They had thought of parceling out the remaining lands in question, and she had drafted a list of suitable younger sons from major houses of the north that they could approach to swear fealty to John. Sons who had no lands of their own, but when given some could draw on their family's resources to bring petty lords, retainers and small folk to populate their lands. Which led to the dilemma they were currently faced with. None of them accepted. She couldn't hide the disappointment from her tone. Benjen sighed. The start is always the hardest. They want to see what they are getting, what it turns out to be, before committing. I had thought their ambition would exceed that, she admitted quietly. That they would be more eager to join Ned Stark's son if only to grow closer to him. I don't think it is ambition they are lacking. It's just the North is a hard land, it makes hard people. And here change is not as easy to accept without a little skepticism. She realized he was right. Land was never an issue in the vast North, which by its own matched the other 6 kingdoms combined. Getting people to leave their stable, existing lives to populate those bare, empty lands was a different matter. That was the reason so many holdfasts like Stony Shore and Sea Dragon Point sat empty and unused for so long. Perhaps they should consider that they might not get the opportunity again when we find those willing to take a risk and fill the role, she said bitingly. In its current state that might be difficult, even for the most loyal and optimistic of men. Ben conceded and she frowned. What do you mean? Well, as of now, the grasslands are the only territory that is fully self-sufficient through the seasons. No one will risk starvation, no matter the promise of land or wealth. That's what the trading posts are for, are they not? To transport resources and food until the city is livable on its own. Once that is taken care of, we should start seeing real interest pick up. Though I went to White Harbor to recruit merchants and shipbuilders, as we talked about. Let me guess, she said dully, they did not wish to come either. They didn't seem keen to relocate to our bare coasts. Not to mention Lord Wyman, I've met him a couple times, he was my father's friend. He's a sharp man with deep pockets. Anyone worth keeping, he'd make sure they stay in place. It was a loop. She wanted to pull at her hair. They wouldn't move because there were no resources, yet to build the resources they needed the men. She sat on the rock trying to conceal her dejection. Gods, this was turning into such a mess. Could she have miscalculated? Benjen placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Hey, it's not the end of the road, Ash. Trust me, I will take care of everything. I will talk to Lord Marndale directly, ask him for use of his ships as a favor to House Stark. Sure, it will burn through gold for a bit, but once our ships are completed, once we've established our bases, it will not matter. We might need his help for a year or 2 at most, but we should be able to pick up on our own. We can offer reduced taxes, hunting privileges and other incentives to bring the first batch to settle the frontier. After that people will come rushing in, it will take care of itself. You will see. He said it with such surety, she wanted to believe it. She bit her lip, and Lord Marndale would agree to that, as long as we pay for the use of his ships in the future. Ben shrugged, looking grim. He wouldn't refuse directly, not after invoking House Stark's interests. But he's a hard negotiator and we are a direct rival to him now. I'm sure he would want something in addition to the gold, perhaps he'll try demanding a cut of our profits or something of the like. Maybe 15 or 20% for a couple years, we'd have to barter. And of course, we cannot fully count on the quality of the ships he sends being what we expect. That would be a steep blow, even if it were only for a set couple years. They couldn't pay everybody for everything, she wanted to argue, and now it was looking like they'd be sinking in debts and promises for years even while she had no intention of repaying the crown their loan. But what other choice was there? 291 AC at Winterfell. Benjen Stark. You didn't get the response you were looking for, I take it. Daisy greeted him with a kiss. She said she will think about it. Ben countered, though he knew Ashura far too well to believe she wanted to. Ash would have agreed if Ned just let me bring her to, he added rather petulantly. I don't know why he is being so hard-headed. He loves her still. He admitted as much to you, didn't he? Love makes people do hard-headed things, she told him simply. Daisy's words made sense, he thought sourly. Ned would not risk even the slimmest chance of harm coming to her, no matter how much Ben insisted the king didn't matter. I hate it when you are right. I'm always right, she challenged, making him smile. Are you now, Lady Mormont? He enquired, tracing her arm. That's Lady Stark to you. Her teasing only served to remind him of Ned's wife, which reminded him of his current frustrations. Catelyn did the only thing she could still do to lash out now that she had been either stripped of or forced with supervision on nearly every responsibility as the castle's lady. She hurled her cruel words at the subjects of her hostility. However much Ned and Ashura tried to protect Jon and Lyanna, they couldn't stay young and innocent forever, and it hurt them, he knew. No matter how much they loved their siblings, hearing that woman's filth still hurt them, and Ben hated that. They were just children, he thought, they shouldn't have had to put up with all of it. His jaw twitched remembering how he'd begged Ned for leave to take them to Bear Island. Let me talk to Daisy, the Mormonts have always been loyal to us. It would be an honor for Lord Jorah and Bear Island to foster the children of Eddard Stark, and their mother. That had made Ned freeze in his tracks. No, he said coldly. Robert was clear that Ashura was not to leave Winterfell. He considered it my punishment as much as it is hers because I defended her after she insulted him in front of his entire court. He need never know. The North remembers that and more, and they are loyal to you. It's not the kind of thing that can stay hidden. And even by chance if it were, he hesitated, I don't want to let them go. I can't let them go. I can't risk it. They are my children. Risk them. Ned, you know they wouldn't come to harm with me around. I can protect them, he pleaded, but his brother wouldn't meet his eyes. Father thought the same once. Ned told him quietly, and then he went south and never came back. Bear Island isn't the south. You know I will guard them with my life. I'm sorry, Ben, but Jon and Lyanna are not going anywhere. They will stay at my side, he finished with no room for argument, and Ben heard the words he didn't say clearly enough. Where I know for certain they are safe. That had stung him. As if he was incapable of protecting them from the occasional wildlings or Ironborn raids, Ben thought indignantly, even the latter of which had plummeted in Bear Island since the Ironborn rebellion. What's with the glum face now? His wife questioned curiously. His wife, he remembered with a smile. Sorry, I was just thinking of Ned. How he didn't want to send Jon and Lyanna either, with or without Ashura. I just thought if she agreed, we could override him. She hummed thoughtfully, he doesn't wish to stay apart from them. Yes, he admitted, but there's more to it. It's why he hasn't entertained fostering requests for any of them, Robb or Sansa included. The gods know every lord in the north has asked more than once. Ned is still too stricken by the memory of what had happened to my father, Brandon and Lyanna, to ever wish them to leave, at least not while he can control it. His face grew pained at that, and she placed an arm over his gently. You okay? He took a deep breath. I'm fine. I wonder sometimes how things might have been different. If Lyanna had lived, he knew she wouldn't have married Robert. Well, at least the Lyanna he had remembered wouldn't have. Their dying sister, as Ned had described, had sounded a lot more broken than he had ever known her to be. Would Jon have been an infant king then? Ned wouldn't have let Robert Baratheon harm their nephew or sister. What if Rhaegar Targaryen had won on the Trident? Ned would be furious at the prince for his friend's death, but no doubt also for running away with their sister, no matter what the two of them had intended. He'd have forgiven her though, wouldn't he? The thought of his siblings being estranged in any life was unthinkable. And what if Brandon hadn't run off like a fool and demanded the prince's death? Sometimes he still couldn't believe it. Brandon. It was like he had been born to rule Winterfell, a king of winter come again, in every way. Handsome and charming, fierce and reckless, and no one in all the north had been better with a sword. And then he just died. Perhaps Catelyn wouldn't have turned into such a bitter woman if he had lived, as hard as that was to imagine. And Ned and Ash would have gotten to marry. Perhaps they would have given a little Lyanna Stark, a couple siblings more. All the while Jon would be in the capital, a Targaryen princeling. It was all so strange to think about. He could scarcely imagine Jon and Lyanna as cousins, living worlds apart, the two were so close. And Robb, Sansa, Arya and Bran, would they even still exist as Brandon's children? He couldn't truly picture anything different in his mind. For everything that turns worse, usually something else turns better, he told himself. If Lyanna had lived, the guilt of father and Brandon would have tormented her, and he couldn't stand the thought of that. He would have never gotten to grow close as he was to Ashera, who was like a sister to him now. And what would have happened to him? Without the spark that was Jon, he might be a black brother right now. He'd always wanted to join the Night's Watch, a noble sacrifice to do the little he could in his duty to the realm. To play a part in something that was bigger than him. But that was before he had learned of the duty he had to his blood. If he had, he would have never met Daisy. What would his life be without her in it? Not as good as it was with her, of that much he was certain. But there's no use dwelling on it, he said out loud to Daisy, we just have to keep looking ahead at what we can still do. Jon Snow. Mother wasn't feeling well. Lyanna didn't think so, but he could tell. She always looked perfectly normal when they were around, except to him her eyes always seemed a bit heavier. And she had taken to having father watch over him and Lyanna some evenings while she would lock herself up in her room all alone claiming she was tired. But what sealed the deal was the other day when Lyanna had asked her what games she used to play in Starfall as a girl, and mother had abruptly sent them to play with Robb, Sansa and Arya with a dull look in her eyes. That was when Jon knew she was missing home. And with mother's 26th name day soon approaching, he had resolved to do something about it. Dear Uncle Lord Aaron Dane. Jon stared at the parchment blankly, as he had been for the past couple minutes. What was he even to write? The truth was he and Lyanna knew next to nothing about their living uncle. Mother only ever had to say that he was surely as dutiful a lord as he had been an heir. She didn't like talking about him, he knew, even if she gushed about Uncle Arthur and even the little she remembered of their Aunt Illyria. She probably even talked about Aunt Rhalyna more than she had her own brother, and mother had admitted she'd only known her for a couple moons. At first, Jon had thought she did it to spare his uncle the embarrassment. After all, Uncle Arthur was the greatest knight to have ever lived, handsome, chivalrous, beloved by all and the best swordsman in the realm. How could Uncle Aaron possibly match up to that? He was probably rather disappointing, and mother was too kind to ever talk about anyone in an unflattering way even if it were true, so she simply said nothing at all. But that didn't really make sense. Mother was mother. She was the best person in the world and she would still love him because he was her brother, even if he was terrible at everything he did. Not to mention, while sometimes she'd grow sad when telling them of Uncle Arthur and Aunt Illyria, it was something else she felt when Uncle Aaron was mentioned. Jon would feel her stiffen up for the smallest of moments every time, something he wouldn't have ever picked up on had he not been cuddled so tightly in her embrace. There would be a strange look in her eye too, one he didn't know the meaning of. That was why he had initially thought to address the letter to Aunt Illyria instead, before he remembered his graces. It wouldn't have been very courteous to send a letter to anyone else first since Starfall was his uncle's keep. Jon, I'm bored, his sister interrupted his musings while she threw herself by his side on the chair. Do you want to raid the kitchens? Or maybe we could go, she trailed off seeing what was in front of him. Are you writing a letter? To whom? She perked up, the surprise clearly piquing her interest. To Starfall for Uncle Aaron. Lyanna wrinkled her nose. Why? Even Mama doesn't write to him and only old people like sending letters. She must not want to hear from him. He paused considering his twin's words. Could it be true? If Lyanna was far away, he knew he'd want to hear from her all the time. He'd want to hear from Rob, Sansa, Arya just as much, and even little baby Bran, though he couldn't even talk, much less write. They were siblings, they couldn't just not want to talk anymore. His twin frowned when he said as much and looked to be in thought. Mama came here because she was a traitor to the king, right? What if they had a fight because of it and they aren't talking anymore? She shrugged before bouncing away. I'm going to ask Papa when we go riding today. He probably knows. But the Danes had fought for the dragons, they wouldn't do that for King Robert. And even if they did support him now, who would pick the side of some stupid king over their own sibling? Rob and Lya fought sometimes, and Sansa and Arya too, but he knew they would always have each other's backs. No, he dismissed the possibility, that couldn't be true. She didn't write to Aunt Illyria either, and Jon knew how much Mother missed her. Something else was going on. A sudden inspiration took him at that, and he realized he knew exactly what he wanted to write, an even better idea that was sure to cheer Mother up, even if he'd need to talk to Father first to approve it. Lyra's no. She was atop the north gate across from her twin as they sat watching the King's Road. Or at least they were supposed to. The stones below them felt as cold as ice to her bare feet, and when she had started complaining of having nothing to do, Jon had come up with a rather ingenious solution to both problems. Toe wrestling. Their toes were linked in an embrace as they both attempted to pin the other's foot down until she finally managed to subdue him, making it her 7th victory in 13 games. Once more, she asked him. Let me just finish this chapter first, he replied, sliding his leg away from hers, and she wanted to whine at the palpable loss of warmth. Jon was the best cuddle partner, she'd found out long ago. He was always nice and snug to the touch. She watched him grab a book from his side. I'll be quick, he promised. Just as he said so, another gust of wind blew at her, sending a shiver down to her toes. Mother had warned her to take her furs up, she remembered grumpily, and she had been right about it, though Lya was never going to admit it to her. Jon's quick reading wasn't going nearly quick enough. Suddenly she perked up, an idea coming to her. So what's this one about? She feigned interest in the work, while creeping to her brother's side and settling on his lap. Finally. Warm again. She thrummed in contentment, wrapping her legs with his. I'm a genius. Uncle Benjen got it for my name day last year. It's about the great wars between the old Empire of Dis and the Valyrian Freehold, he started excitedly, and she was already starting to reconsider the merits of her plan. Mother had started giving Jon extra private lessons once or twice a week after their studies with Maester Luwin were finished, so, in her own words, he would be prepared to be a proper ruler for Moat Cailin one day. Lya had pleaded off them continuously, citing that she wasn't going to be a lord, and Mother had finally actually let her go, much to her delight and Jon's disappointment. He still tried to tell her what he learned about on most days, but she had made it a bit of a habit to tune him out, satisfying him with occasional empty nods and sounds of surprise. That made her feel a little guilty, mostly because he was always so happy about getting to talk about it, but it wasn't her fault she found it all so dreadfully dull. Debating ethics, or infrastructure policies and whatever else they got up to, it sounded like torture. The only one who would hang off every word was Arya, but Lya was pretty sure their little sister didn't understand any of it and was merely content enough that Jon was the one saying it. Especially since, from what she could tell, most of his knowledge came from reading dusty old tomes like this one. That was the strangest part to her, how much Jon actually liked reading. The only other person in the entire castle she had ever seen show that much interest in the library was Mother. At first, she'd figured he was only pretending he did in an attempt to please her, which Lya had to admit had really impressed her coming from Jon. But she quickly saw the genuine thrill on his face every time he started reading, and these days it seemed he carried at least one book everywhere he went. Well, either that or his wooden sword. If anything, that only served to make Jon more peculiar. If no one in Winterfell apart from him liked reading, it seemed everyone loved fighting, but none more than her twin. He spent hours ducking and squatting with that piece of wood, practicing with Sir Roderick long after Rob and the other boys had left. Lya had personally never really seen the appeal for either. Only old men who couldn't move out of their beds and had nothing better to do would waste their day reading books. And all that whirling and twirling with sticks seemed like too much exertion for her tastes. She'd much rather have a horse under her any day of the week and feel the freedom of the wind blowing across her face. Do you know about the Lockstep Legions? her twin quizzed, interrupting her rather pleasant daydream of riding. Should I, she wondered, debating why the cold suddenly seemed much more welcoming. They were the greatest army to ever step into battle. It took 5 wars for the Valyrian freehold to destroy them even with all their dragons. Which made me think, imagine if the 7 kingdoms had a standing, trained army. You are doing it again, Jon, she interrupted, you are being boring. Whatever his response was going to be, it was interrupted by the sound of horses in the distance. They both climbed on the tips of their toes, exchanging grins as they looked out the walls. I'll go get Papa. You make sure Mama is ready and bring her to the hall, she directed him happily while floating away. Ashura. Happy name day, Mama. Jon had come skipping in, his eyes sparkling and a wide smile on his face that she couldn't help but mirror. Thank you, love, she acknowledged while welcoming his kiss. She had missed him the past few weeks. After coming back from Moat Cailin, she couldn't help but notice the long evenings he spent in Ned Solar. It had been her who had to push him away, but she couldn't help feeling a little hurt nonetheless. There was nothing wrong with him going to his father, but she had taken for granted how much she liked that he always turned to her for guidance. It had been her he had come to get his hurts kissed away when he fell. It had been her who he'd run to after every nightmare to seek comfort in. And it had been her he had always felt secure in confiding all his doubts and fears to. What would happen when the day soon came that he and Lyra no longer needed her at all? She mused darkly. There is a surprise waiting for you. Jon informed her with all the seriousness a boy of 8 could muster, but you can only see it after you have worn the new gown first and brushed your hair. A surprise that needed her to dress up. She narrowed her eyes while tucking a stray curl behind his ear, watching him for any hint of what it could be. No luck. It's probably one of Lyra and Sansa's little tea parties, she thought, unable to help the silent groan as she remembered their last attempt when the girls had decided the mint sun tea's coloring wasn't dark enough and proceeded to add nearly half a pack of saffron to get it right. Drinking that had her stomach rumbling for the entire day. She turned back to Jon. I'd best get ready then, don't you think? Wait here on the bed, she offered, while gracefully grabbing the dress and sliding past the changing curtain. It was a sleeveless silk garment of a simple red with sewn figures of black trees lacing the crest. A silly smile went on her face as she remembered the effort her daughter had undertaken in selecting her gift. She had first recruited Sansa's help in picking the design after having gotten Ned to take the pair of them to a visiting clothier. Then, she had sent Ben off to pick up said dress at White Harbor. Lyra could be such a sweetheart, she thought while slipping it on. She scrutinized herself in the mirror, tugging at the fit of the garb against her hips. It seemed to accommodate her figure well enough, she thought with relief. She had hardly ever worried over anything related to her looks in the past, she'd always been too beautiful for that to have been a true concern. But this time, she hadn't been able to stop herself from being slightly nervous. Since she'd come north, it had been nothing but thick clothes and multiple layers for her, not that there had been a real choice in the matter before, as summer was only now finally here and winter just gone. Lyra's gift had barely appeared to look much larger than the one she'd worn to Harrenhal, and she was no longer a girl of 6 and 10 anymore to slip into whatever she wished so seamlessly. She had barely walked out after finishing brushing her hair when said daughter of her thoughts came bursting through the door and took her brother to the ground. Lyra, he whined, which only served to make the girl giggle. Is she ready? Is she ready? I'm ready, Lyra. Get off your brother, she ordered tenderly. So, what do you two think? She asked, while giving a small twirl. You look beautiful, Mama. Lyra beamed. Mama, Jon added thoughtfully, you are always the prettiest person in the whole world, but today you look extra pretty, like a princess. The genuineness of their compliments made her grin. Now, what is this surprise you two want me to see? Close your eyes. They yelled together and each took one of her hands as they led her across the castle. This was all a little much for a tea party, she wanted to huff exasperatedly, but she couldn't find the heart to add how happy they were for setting it up. All right, you can look now. Jon yelled with excitement. This better be good, Jon, or Mama is going to be very. The words stopped cold in her mouth as her eyes widened and she struggled to breathe. She found herself frozen in place. How could this be? She wanted to say, but she wasn't sure. Even a whisper came out. Abruptly, she broke forward with a run. Aaron. Relina. She hugged each of them. Ally, she blubbered, feeling her vision turn blurry as she dropped frenzied kisses on her sister's forehead. My baby sister, she thought in disbelief, now nearly a woman flowered, if not already. Elle, look at you, you're all grown up. There was a little boy with pale blonde hair and friendly blue eyes who looked no older than 5, shyly standing behind his mother. My nephew, she thought giddily. And who might you be, sweeterling? Say hello to your Aunt Ashura, Ned. Relina Dane replied. She let out a laugh as he waved hello, her head spinning from happiness. Gods, this couldn't all be real, could it? I can't believe it. It's like a dream. But I don't understand. What are all of you doing here? She saw Lyra, having grown tired of their talking, walk right up and pull Illyria, the only one she considered suitable for conversation, away with a come with me. Hello, Lyra. It's Ly, actually. Her sister smiled knowingly, that I understand. I go by Ally. Those two were going to get along well. She watched her daughter drag Illyria away, sure to pepper her with questions. Oh dearest Ashura, Relina stepped forward. We were invited to celebrate your name day, of course. We got the most adorable letter too, with a direwolf seal. She rummaged through a bag before handing her a letter with a smile. Apparently a little nephew of mine was worried his mother was missing home and pleaded ever so nicely that it would fill her with joy to see us for her name day. Well, how could we possibly refuse? She turned to look at John, lips parted in surprise, suddenly feeling her heart grow full. Come here, she whispered, going to her knees with her arms held out wide, and he bounded forward solemnly, his soft curls swaying silently at his sides. She grabbed him in a hug, throat thick with emotion, before mumbling into his ear, how did you know Mama was missing home, John? Home? He looked down, blushing from all the attention. I saw it in your eyes, he said sommely, sounding far older than his years. You looked sad, like how you do when you talk about Uncle Arthur. I know you can't go home right now, so I thought I could bring you home to you, he finished with a shy grin. She pulled him closer, burrowing her face in his back so he couldn't see her tears. Oh my perfect little boy, what did I do to deserve you? Come on now sister, don't keep him all to yourself. I want to see the boy behind the words. Relina bugged. She turned back to them with the brightest smile she remembered wearing in years. You remember I told you about my eldest brother, John? Aaron Dane, the Lord of Starfall. This is my good sister, Lady Relina Dane, and their little boy Ned. Hello Lady Dane, her son welcomed happily, I am pleased to meet you. You are as nice as Mama always said you were. You must call me Aunt Relina, sweeterling. And your mother has taught you your courtesy well. Her good sister praised. If that were true, the boy would know it would be custom to greet his lord uncle first, would he not? Her brother interrupted gruffly, blank-faced. John's smile faded and he turned to look at her, suddenly unsure. She gave him an encouraging nod and he furrowed his eyebrows in thought. It is true, my lord, he admitted slowly, that custom demands a lord be greeted first. But that is for matters of business, is it not? We have welcomed you now not as guests to our home but as family. And I've heard it said that a lord may run his keep, but a lady runs the family, so, should I not greet the lady of the family first? John concluded carefully. Her brother nodded stiffly, yet to Ashura he seemed impressed despite himself. Then you ought to call me uncle from now on, shouldn't you, lad? You ought to watch out for this one, Ashura. He has a way with words. Relina whispered, her smile widening. That he did, she agreed proudly. John was still soft-spoken and unsure at times, yet every word he did speak was as deliberate and thoughtful as he was. If you think this is impressive, you should see the other one, she thought to say. That girl of hers could wrangle a deer bone from a wolf's mouth if she put her charms to it, Ashura was half convinced. Lyra was brash and confident, never giving the words flowing from her mouth a second thought, yet she filled them with innocent smiles and pleading eyes, as different from her brother's style as could be yet no less effective. I believe your cousin has eagerly been waiting for those exceptional Winterfell desserts, John. Would you care to show him there? Winterfell desserts? Of course, Aunt Relina, she saw her son say before taking the younger boy by the hand and walking away. Hello Ned, I'm your cousin John. What was that about? Oh, just poking some fun, dear. It seems my nephew wasn't fully convinced we would show up on our own, so he resorted to good, old-fashioned bribery to get the job done. He promised us cream cakes on arrival. Her good sister grinned with evident mirth. Had he really? Read that line. Reliner pointed to the letter. I know I ask a great deal of you, but if you were to accept it would be my pleasure to show you the hospitality of Winterfell. I am sure you would find it to your liking. We have giant hot springs to bathe and play in, one of the largest libraries in the realm, and Lyra says Gage makes the best cream cakes in all the 7 kingdoms. He makes quite many other treats too. We are going to prepare a fresh batch just for Mother's Name Day. Ashura snorted. Jon, acting as if his sister was the authority on culinary tastes across the realm, was too much for her to handle, not when the girl had never even stepped foot outside Winterfell. His subtlety could use some work still, she critiqued with a smile. It's the sweetest thing, isn't it? It had me laughing all day the first time I read it. Reliner shook her head amused. I'm going to frame this letter when we get back to Starfall and hang it on the wall. Reliner's eyes seemed to run over her, searching for something, before tracing her cheek gently. It is good to see you grown, Ashura, she finally said. Ashura could only stare at her good sister in confusion. What do you mean? She asked, amused. I would say I was pretty well grown last we saw each other. Perhaps you were, Reliner admitted, but back then you seemed so young to me still. Are you well? Well as can be now that I've laid eyes on all of you. The older woman hummed in thought. There's something different about you, I just can't put my finger on. You seem a little lost. A little torn between directions maybe. A little lost. Nothing could be further from the truth. Ashura was as sure of her purpose as she had ever been. Seeing Tywin Lannister's head on a spike next to Gregor Clegane, Amory Lorque and Robert Baratheon. That was all that was important. That was all that mattered. Never mind me, her good sister shook her head, before turning to the waiting party. We are being quite rude, Ashura. I recognize our dear Lord Stark, but you must introduce Aaron and I to our other good lord and lady. Of course. She had always found it amazing how Reliner drew people to her like moths to a fire. She was such a lovely person, Ashura doubted there was anyone who could ever dislike her. The deduction was running through her mind as she watched the women entertain Daisy, Ned and Benjen at once. You are a good mother. Aaron's voice came from behind her, making her spin around. He almost sounded surprised by that, though she should have expected as much. Given how they had last parted, he probably considered her the most worthless person alive. The children look happy and well. The air between them was awkward to say the least. Now that the euphoria of her brother's surprise arrival had gone, a part of her, the bitter, vengeful part of her, wanted to throw the disrespect he had once presented to her back in his face. His harsh words had tormented her for years, leaving deep scars, some of which had still not healed. In fact, it surprised her he was here at all. If he had thought her a shame on the Dane name before, Ned Stark's pet mistress, she remembered him degrading her. She had only become a further embarrassment since, a traitor to the realm mercifully confined to Winterfell only by the timely intervention of Ned Stark. Reliner had probably coerced him into the journey. But whatever the reason, she told herself, he had still come. The last brother left to her. It had been so long since she'd last laid eyes on them, without ever so much as a raven of communication to any of them, and she couldn't find it in her heart to hold on to the resentment any longer. Perhaps, the ever-hopeful part of her speculated, he had come willing to make amends. Shut up, she told it. It has not been easy, not nearly as easy as father and mother made it look, she admitted neutrally, searching for common ground. Half the times her daughter would holler and argue over anything she asked of her before loudly letting Ashura know what a tyrant she was. She wanted nothing more than to let out a strangled laugh at how much Lyra reminded her of her younger self. After her mother died, she had clashed constantly with her father, considering him tyrannical and hard. Perhaps he had been, she mused, and age had just turned her into more of the same. Whatever the case, she had found firsthand how hard it was raising kids, and that was with her still having Ned willing to help when he wasn't wrapped up in his duties. No, he echoed, it isn't. We have found the same, Reliner and I. He looked to be pondering whether to say more before deciding against it and pulling out a flagon. Is that Dornish red? He confirmed. She admired it gleefully, having missed the rich wines of the South more than she could have imagined. It was always your favorite. Even when you were a girl, you would howl and fuss that the rest of us got to drink it at dinner, so you should be allowed to as well. She felt her cheeks redden at the memory. For a long while it had been her that was the baby of the family. The boys, Arthur and Aaron, had been 13 and 14 by the time she was born, nearly grown men. They had doted on her, along with their parents. Our Lady Mother would water down yours so much, it was practically just water. But you'd sip it happily all the same, delighted you were being included. He held it out to her. A truce, tentative as it was. She grabbed it without hesitation. You never did like to share your things, she said without true bite. I mean, you finished half of it yourself. He still seemed strangely pompous despite the dig. And I know you could never content yourself with what you were already given, he countered, so I made sure to bring more. More. Did he sneak another bottle somewhere? As if right on cue she saw the door burst open, the two Starfall guards dragging something in. It wasn't just one bottle. She couldn't stop herself from letting out a laugh of disbelief when a whole cart of Dornish Red came to a halt at her side. Enough to last a year at least. Now that was a peace offering. She conceded the loss this round, as they moved to join with the others. I'm sure that would make your brother proud to hear. R'Elinor joked. Oh, I doubt that, she disagreed sharply. Proud and Ashura haven't ever belonged in the same sentence in Aaron's mind. She saw Ned turn to her with an uncomfortable look and Ben and Daisy exchanging glances. Perhaps she was being more than a little graceless, but she didn't care to fabricate a truth that wasn't there. They had never gotten along much, and she had accepted that a long time ago. She had been feeling the prickle of irritation building the past hour at the constant buttering up of their relationship, though whether that reason was for her brother's peace of mind or hers she didn't know. Whichever the case, it felt belittling, as if she were so thin-skinned to burst into tears at the slightest clashing of heads. I've always been proud to have you as my sister, he refuted quietly, no matter how much we disagreed. He couldn't seriously be trying this. I can't remember you ever being proud of anything I did before, she challenged. You always thought I was just a spoiled selfish brat who you would have loved nothing more than to ship off to the marriage bed of the first High Lord you could find. He snorted derisively, and she saw for the first time the smallest hint of tension take his form. No more than you thought I was always your joy-sucking villain. To you, I could never ever be right about anything because the sun always shined out of Arthur's ass. There he was, she nearly smirked, the prideful jerk she remembered. That's because Arthur was better than you at everything. She was ready to retaliate before R'Elinor quickly cut in. Speaking of lords, we have been keeping our ear out for word on your ongoings, and we heard Little John is to be Lord of the Moat. Ashura blinked rapidly, finally realizing how heatedly they had been glaring at each other, before relaxing back into the chair and smiling tightly. Yes. He is. Isn't that great, Aaron? Her good sister nudged with an elbow in the ribs. Yes. Great, he grumbled. We saw some of the construction on the way. The lands are habitable in quality, I suppose. She felt her fist tighten. Gods, he was so condescending and infuriating still. I'm glad you approve, she said through narrowed eyes, because I'm the one who chose it. Yes, I can tell, he muttered. Can you? It is not the land quality I care for. It is the seas. I envision it will turn into quite the spot for trade. She basked in smug satisfaction at the surprised look on his face, as momentary as it was. You'd know all about that, I'd wager, he admitted slowly before turning away. Benjen took the ensuing silence as an opportunity to tell them about all that they had done for Moat Cailin so far. Can I offer you some advice? R'Elinor asked that evening after pulling her outside. Of course, you can. Ashura could already wager a guess of what this was about. She had been lashing out at Aaron, mingling in cutting remarks and unsuspecting quips all day until he had finally had enough and stiffly stormed off, much to her satisfaction. But now that she was faced with the sketch of disappointment running across her good sister's face, she couldn't help but look away shamefaced. R'Elinor didn't deserve to be caught in between their struggle, not after all the effort she had gone through in dragging her brother here in the first place. I never had any siblings growing up, though I always wanted them. So I always dreamed I'd have a big family to make up for it, she admitted confidentially, but Ned is the only child I'll ever have, if the Maester is to be believed. He's my little miracle, and I am all right with that. I've got two sisters now after all. Ashura felt her throat bob at Relyna's words. But I wish for Ned to know his family. All his family. Seeing him today, following Jon everywhere and how much he looked up to him, I want that for him. I have no right to ask this of you, I know. You have every reason to be angry with Aaron, to not want to accept his apology. Apology? She blurted astounded, making her good sister frown in confusion. I take it he did not apologize, then. Apologize? Aaron. Her incredulity must have shown on her face because Relyna let out a pearly laugh. No. He'd been planning what to say the entire way here. But your brother is proud and stubborn. Proud and stubborn ran in their family, she thought slowly. He may not admit it to you, but he regretted his words deeply. Every day since, he has missed you and wondered how you were doing. That's why he was so excited when he got Jon's letter. It was the happiest I've seen him in years. He may as well have been jumping for joy if he were capable of it. It was Aaron's idea to come. She looked down perplexed. I thought that you can be sure, I'd have dragged him here by the neck if I had to. But it truly was his desire. Regret filled her at the discovery. He really had come to make amends, and she'd returned it with pettiness and insolence. I will talk with him, she assured her good sister. I will straighten this out. Thank you, Ashura. Relyna returned gratefully. You know, he was proud as well. Of what you did in King's Landing. Ashura looked away. That was too much to believe, she speculated. She could picture him regretting his actions, she could maybe even see him constantly wondering after her well-being, but proud. What had she done that could possibly make him proud of her? When she had said as much, Relyna tilted her head curiously. You really don't know. Perhaps they denounce you north of the Red Mountains, but in Dawn, you are a symbol now, believe it or not. What you did, standing up for Princess Elia, the people love you for it. Even today they whisper and toast to your bravery in every corner, commoner and noble alike. You are a rallying cry to those who want the Lannisters and Baratheons both gone. A hero. Her good sister's words left her stunned. She hadn't felt brave or like any kind of symbol at the time, just a stupid defiant girl whose head would have been mounted from a spike without Ned. But she endeavored to take the surprising news in stride. I never thought everyone would know the details. Oh, that bit was the Queen's doing actually, if you can believe it. She thought it would turn the realm and the king against Lord Stark for supporting you, so she spread the tale far and wide. But people didn't quite take it that way. They even made a song of Ned Stark's tragic love for you, and how he was willing to stand up to the king himself for it. They did. If only she knew how that would backfire. Relyna shook her head with a smile. But I think your brother was proud of you regardless. You are the reason Aaron has softened up when dealing with little Ally, or tried to at any rate, which I'm sure she's appreciated. He has even let her start training with the Master at Arms. He's seen it as a second chance of sorts. Not to fail her like he feels he failed you. That was. She didn't know how to take all these changes, as outlandish as it sounded. Ally Ashura finally deduced she's avoiding me, isn't she? Well, it hasn't been easy for her without you either. But don't worry, she will talk to you today. Based on Relyna's look, Ashura thought that her sister was going to have to talk to her whether she wished it or not. As her good sister promised, she found Illyria waiting for her at her bed not even an hour later. Ally. The girl held out her brush. Could you? Ashura smiled. How long had she wished to get this chance again? Of course. She took the brush, gently stroking through her sister's hair. You have no idea how much it gladdens my heart to see you, and so hale and happy. How I have missed you. She looked down tenderly at her. Have you been well, little sister? Well enough, she replied curtly. Did you enjoy your day with Jon and Lyra? Ashura tried again. I did. Jon and Lyra are sweet children, just like Ned. As are the Starks. She remembered Relyna's earlier words. I'm glad you have Ned to keep you company. I can imagine it wasn't always easy, after I left. Illyria's lips pursed. It got somewhat lonely at times with only Relyna, but yes, it's been better with Ned there. They sat in silence for a moment, and Ashura could think of thousands of different things she wanted to tell Illyria at that moment. Suddenly, she noticed a mirthless expression take hold of her sister. You know, I used to wait every day at the top of your tower so I wouldn't miss the day you three returned. Ashura looked at her in shock. I asked Aaron when you were coming home and he said you never were. That the king was punishing you for treason. I called him a liar and I told him that wasn't possible because you told me you would come back. That you would bring Jon and Lya when they were old enough and I'd grow up as close to them as I was to you. It took me 3 years until I realized he was right. She shook her head with a self-deprecating smile. I know. I was quite the idiot, wasn't I? Ashura looked down guiltily. I didn't think you would remember that. But it was never. What was I supposed to think? She countered with more than a hint of anger. You never wrote, Ash. You never. It was like you just died, as Arthur did, and I was all alone. All I wanted was to play with your dolls and wear your old dresses and pretend I could hear you laughter when I said something outrageous. Rhalyna tried her best, but she had duties too. You think anyone could just replace that? She spat out. That Ned could just come one day and replace you. Ashura could only shake her head, unable to speak. I hated it. Every time I heard someone say you were a hero to Dawn. What did I care if everyone was celebrating your name, if all it meant was I'd never see you again? I blamed you at first. I told Aaron I never wanted to see your face again, her sister said, and Ashura turned away, the admission slicing through her like steel. Not you too. Those were the only times Aaron ever got mad at me. He and Rhalyna told me that you were probably even more lonely than I was. And that your struggle was even harder staying away from home, without your family, and raising Jon and Lya all on your own. Ashura kept her head down, before she saw her sister start to shake. I never actually meant it. I just thought you chose Princess Elia over me even while she was dead and I was still alive, and I was angry. I couldn't help but think maybe you didn't love me as much as I love you. That she was the real sister you'd always wanted and I was just. She trailed off with sobs. Gods, Eli, no. No, I know you fought with Aaron, but what did that have to do with me? She pleaded desperately. How could you just forget about me like that, throw me away like that when I just always wanted you? Oh Eli, she thought sorrowfully, you have no idea how often I've wanted to write to you, how many times I put a quill to paper just to throw it away. How much I longed to take you in my arms again, but how could I, when I knew in my heart you would be better off without me? The thought made her break down into tears. I'm sorry. I shouldn't make you cry, not on your name day. Eli whispered, though she was still tearing up as well. No, I'm sorry Eli. I'm so sorry. If I could make it up to you. You can. Stop crying for one, or Aaron will ground me till I am a woman grown, if he finds out. She shot back with a smile, making Ashura let out a watery laugh. Her sister continued hesitantly, and for the 2 weeks we do get together here, will you show me everything we missed out on? I don't want to waste a single moment more holding on to the past, I just want to spend it all with you. I would love that. When they had finally joined the others for dinner, she saw all the children sitting around her brother eagerly. Even Daisy, Benjen and Ned looked suspiciously interested. When had Aaron turned into such a beloved speaker? She walked closer and froze when she heard what he was saying. Your mother stomped her foot insistently, this tiny lick of a girl about the age of Arya here, and cried, but I want to ride on the boats. And then she ran out of the castle as naked as the day she was born, and your grandmother sent Arthur and I to fetch her. Ashura's face burned red, and when he turned to look at her she saw the smirk through his eyes. The ass. By the time we managed to catch up with her, she'd very nearly reached this little boat, painted violet, claiming she wanted it because of its pretty color. And not before giving all of Starfall a show. Lyra burst out into chuckles. Gods, I can hardly believe Mama did that. It's hilarious. I want another one. Not in your dreams. She moved forward, ready to put an end to it. Ash. Daisy hissed pleasantly, come on, it's just good fun. Ashura settled in the seat next to her with an angry splash. This was going to be a long night, she realized, pouring herself a generous serving of wine. As the sound of laughter commenced, Ashura took another swing of the Dornish red. Careful Ash, Daisy whispered with a grin, any more of that and we won't be able to tell if it is the wine or the embarrassment that has your cheeks so pink. Hilarious, she wanted to growl. Her idiot brother had finished spilling the details of every embarrassing baby story of her she could remember by now, and even a number she didn't. Ned was smiling faintly, the only one at least attempting to cover his amusement. It was her name day, and they were having fun at her expense. She tried to think of ways to avenge her honor, but her mind kept coming up empty. The only mortifying memories she had of him were catching him various times with girls while sneaking about the castle, and that was hardly an appropriate topic in front of a bunch of children. Oh, there was one more story. Aaron started with a harsh glint in his eye. About Ashura, a basket of blood oranges and a sand dog. No. Her eyes widened, realizing what tale he wanted to tell. That is it. She bit her lip, feeling her face contort in fury. I've had enough of his little revenge, I'm not going to take a minute more of this. She made to stand up if only for the satisfaction of spilling the contents of her wine glass all over his head. No, she reconsidered, Dornish Red was too good to waste on him. Perhaps she'd just sock him in the face instead. But before she could act on that desire, Jon had gotten out of his seat first and began frowning at her brother, seeming rather unimpressed. Perhaps on the morrow, Nuncle. It is getting rather late. He was right, she realized, it was way past time they went to sleep. But Jon surprised her once more by walking up to her side instead. Papa said we could stay up a little longer since it was a special day today. So, will you honor me with a dance, Mama? He requested earnestly. A wide smile took over her face despite herself. He was so precious, she thought adoringly, feeling her anger slowly drain out of her. The honor would be mine, sweeterling. Ned Stark. Her face lit up at something Benjen whispered in her ear, and as he watched them dance he couldn't help but wish he was in his brother's place. Not to be outdone by Jon, Robb had asked Ashura for a dance next, and not soon after the children had been sent off to bed. He had very nearly asked her himself before shoving the idea away forcefully. He was a married man, no matter how dead set marriage was. Catelyn had never even come out of her wing for a greeting of courtesy, claiming she had to care for young Bran the entire day. A lack of respect he was sure the Danes had noticed, even if they hadn't spoke of it. He had sworn oaths, he reminded himself. But, it would just be a dance. Nothing but a celebration of her name day, a kindness. Even if he knew it wouldn't really. He'd brought Ashura enough dishonor already. He blinked out of his musings, realizing she was standing right in front of him. Happy name day, my lady. She smiled blindingly. Thank you, my lord. I just wanted to thank you myself for your hospitality toward my family. There is no need, he assured her. It was my pleasure. His eyes scanned the floor, realizing he couldn't find the Lord of Starfall any longer. Aron Dayne had danced with his sister for quite a while as they spoke in hushed whispers, and he hoped for Ashura's sake it had ended in a pleasant resolution. She seemed to notice his eyes darting about, and she grinned. My brother retired for the night. He was rather keen on taking full advantage of the private time he could get with Rhalyna. I saw you two together for a while. I hope you had a pleasant dance, he probed lightly, and her eyes suddenly seemed far away. It was eventful. We have come to an understanding of sorts. Ned had never understood their dynamic, remembering how much she would complain of her eldest brother even during their time together. But that time he had finally met him in Starfall, he had never remembered getting that angry ever before or since. Whatever their quarrels, how could any brother speak in such a manner to their own sister? Especially one like Ashura. Her eyes snapped back to him and she spoke suddenly. Speaking of dancing, would you care for one with me? It seems I've gotten at least one with everyone else. His mouth went dry as he looked at her in surprise. Ash, I don't know if that would be best, was what he ought to have said, but he couldn't not when she was looking at him so hopefully. I would be honored. He willed himself not to twitch like a green boy as he placed a hand on her hip. God's lie, he felt like groaning at his daughter, why did you have to choose a dress like this? If she caught his briefly wandering eyes, she was kind enough to pretend not to notice. This was a terrible idea. The dress was hugging against her curves perfectly. What? She asked, wide-eyed. He realized in growing horror he'd said that out loud. I just said, your dress suits you well, he said after swallowing hard. Lia chose wisely. She sent him a beaming smile. Another thing I have to thank you for. You should never thank me. So, is this why John spent all these weeks in your solar? She prompted as they swayed slowly across the floor. He smiled, eyes crinkling. He came to me, nearly a moon back at my solar, and he says with such seriousness, I have a favor I must ask of you, Lord Stark. I shall forever be in your debt if you allow it. Ashura leaned into his chest at that, shaking against him with silent giggles. He didn't. He did. Ned insisted. I was so taken aback, I couldn't even respond for a minute. Then he presented me with his idea and a letter, and he very nearly started explaining the benefits allowing such an endeavor would be for House Stark in the future, until I told him I already approved. Truth be told, he hadn't been sure if he had wanted to approve it. John had meant well, but his son hadn't known all that had transpired between Ashura and her brother in the past, not like he did. Ned had finally agreed, figuring if the Lord of Starfall actually made the journey he would likely wish to make amends, and if he didn't intend to do so he wouldn't bother coming in the first place, so there would be no harm. He had still remained worried how she would take the visit, up until the moment they had actually seen each other. Ned spun her around, and as their dance ended, and he couldn't help but notice she seemed a bit down. "Do you want to get a drink?" he asked, and she accepted gratefully. He sat hearing her speak of her conversation with her brother, of how he had admitted to having too much to drink today and actually apologized for the stories and his words all those years ago. "I thought about apologizing to him before, but now I don't know." "Do what feels right to you," he advised her softly. "No matter what comes of it, you will not need to second-guess the choice." "You are always a good listener," she complimented. "It must be because you have nice earlobes." "Nice earlobes? I always liked your earlobes," she admitted, contently. His eyes fell on the near-empty flagon at her side. "How much of that Dornish red have you had tonight?" She collapsed into giggles before guiltily acknowledging just a little bit. Gods, that's why she has been so giddy all night, he realized rapidly. She had been sipping the wine the whole evening, and now she's finally drunk. He looked around, startled that they were the only ones left. Ben and Daisy must have gone away too. He spent the next half an hour chaperoning her as she took him to the window to say hello to the swaying tree she was sure was waving at her, to the kitchens in search of something spicy to eat, and then to the Godswood for comfort when she in fact hadn't found anything spicy to eat. She even made an adorable drunkard, he couldn't help but think. "I can't walk," he heard her complain with a frown, as she sank to the floor. "My legs are jelly now." He hesitated only a moment before cradling her in his arms and carrying her to her room. He laid her in the bed, laying the fur snugly over her. "I will take my leave now and let you sleep," he whispered, but she wouldn't let go of his arm. "You don't have to go," she offered slowly. If only that were true, Ash, he thought sadly. Her eyebrows furrowed at his silence. Did you hear me?" she whined, her speech starting to slur. "You can have your wicked way with me if you'd like, whatever you wish." "I won't tell anyone," she purred naughtily, holding a single shushing finger to her mouth. Gods, she was going to be the death of him. Her shoulders sagged in defeat when he didn't respond. "It's all right if you don't want to," she mumbled, eyes falling to the floor with a doleful pout. "I understand." "Don't want to?" She didn't understand at all. "It's hard sometimes," he admitted quietly a few minutes later, after making himself comfortable in silence on the corner of her bed. "How much I want you. To have you right here, right by my side, yet not being able to do a thing. Seeing how much you love John and Lia, and even care for Rob, Sansa and Arya like they were your own. Watching you enjoy spending time in Wintertown just listening to people no matter who they are or where they are from. And how you always walk with your head held high, filled with so much pride, and do whatever you believe in no matter what. I think I love you even more now than I always did, if that were ever possible. But I could never do that to you. I couldn't disrespect you in that manner, not after I've already done so much to hurt you. You are probably going to roll your eyes and say you never cared what the world thought of you. That if we both wish it, there is nothing wrong with enjoying the pleasures of the flesh, and you don't mind what others will say of you for it," he told her fondly, remembering what she'd advised him at Harrenhal. "But it matters to me. You deserve more, Ashura. So much more." The only sound still in the room after his words had finished were her soft snores. "Of course." He turned around, shaking his head with a small smile, and laid a kiss on her temple while tracing her cheek. "Good night, Ash." "Ashura Dane." She got up with a groan, pushing her hair out of her face and feeling her head pounding heavily. How much wine had she had last night? I'm never doing that again. She sank back into the bed, lazily burrowing her nose into the warmth of the dark curls beside her. Dark curls. Her heart skipped a beat and she prayed she hadn't done something as stupid as she was thinking. No, 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 I couldn't have. It was just John. She opened her eyes, seeping with relief and perhaps just the tiniest bit of disappointment. Good morning, Mama, he grinned up at her. Morning, love. If he were in her bed, that meant. Did you have a nightmare yesterday? He shrugged, only a small one. Gods, Ashura grimaced guiltily, she was a horrible mother. Drinking herself happily in her cups while John had need of her. It wasn't that bad, this time. Really, he insisted on seeing her look, I only counted the stars once and I slept the whole night. He had started getting the hang of controlling them, she could acknowledge. They only tended to happen 2 or 3 times a month these days, and even when they did, John didn't seem nearly as worse off as he used to. Perhaps it really was all right. So did you enjoy your name day yesterday? He interrogated. I did. Very much, thanks to you, she smiled down at him, kissing his nose. It had been a rather unbelievably amazing day. A perfect day, even. What did you do after we went to sleep? He needled innocently. Well, I kept dancing. With your uncles and your father. And we talked. And then what? And then, she frowned, unable to remember. What had she done? She couldn't even recall how she had finally gotten into bed. I slept, I suppose. I don't really remember. He knit his brows, clearly misliking her answer. You don't remember? I saw Papa bring you to sleep when I woke, he informed her. Unable to help himself, he carried you in his arms like he carries Leia sometimes, when she's tired. And then he tucked you in and he what? She prompted, suddenly feeling hot. You really don't remember? He questioned her, undeniably upset. What in 7 hells was she supposed to remember? But her son wouldn't elaborate. That was kind of him. I will be sure to thank him for helping me so gently. John stayed silent for a minute longer, before turning to her Aunt Illyri. Ally, he quickly amended, wanted to meet you and Aunt Relina at the hot springs when you woke up, he said quietly before strolling out. Had she said or done something embarrassing in front of Ned? That would fit right in with her luck. I'll just have to ask him later. She got up, reluctantly, preparing to ready herself for her outing. This was pretty nice. She heard her sister say, satiated, as they wrapped up the entire morning conversing while relaxing in the warm water. It was, Ashura thought while lying down, the heated waves massaged her scalp. The hot springs were even better than just laying back in the heated sand like they would in Starfall. I promised Leia I would join the rest of them after lunch. What will you do in the meantime? I will talk to Aaron. I want to clear the air with him, once and for all. Her sister nodded cheekily. Have fun. She eventually found him on one of the castle towers, peering down below. Admiring the view, are you? He acknowledged her arrival, still looking down. Winterfell, he started, there's only so much you can do with words. It's something else to see the truth yourself. There's a strength to these stones, a warmth to the place, and it's certainly larger than Starfall. But it's just not our home. Our home. Was it still her home, when she would never be allowed to lay eyes on it again? Not for many more years at least. Starfall will always be your home, as much as it is mine, he let her know as if he could read her thoughts. No matter when you next see her or if you never do. Suddenly a wistful smile graced his face. That boy of yours, he said something in his letter in a bid to get us to come here, something I couldn't take my mind off ever since. A home is who you love, not where you are. She had told John that often enough, to convince him she'd always find him in his nightmares. Mother's words. It's been so long I'd forgotten, he said sorrowfully, as if the admission shamed him. I don't wish to fight with you any longer, she said, walking to fill the space next to him. Nor do I. I remember some things too, she said quietly. When I was small, there was a boy. He liked to call himself a man, but he was still a boy then, she smirked at his faint smile. He used to take me to the water. Father had told him not to let me past the stones, but I wanted to go deeper and surprisingly enough he didn't refuse me. He said, the only way he was letting me was if I held his hand. So I did. We went deeper and deeper and, the waves grew too strong. I told him I wanted to go back, that I was scared. There's nothing to fear from the waves, Ash, he told me. They are the sea's heartbeat, just like your own. They take ships out to sea and provide for everything that needs feeding, like our mother feeds you. The waves were hitting my face so hard I thought they might pull me away. But he never let go of my hand. And I never feared the sea again. She snuck her hand into his hesitantly. No, you fell in love with it instead. That was the last time you ever did. I suppose father could have found out and put a stop to it, or perhaps Aaron the heir had too many important things to learn to have any more time chasing after his little sister. I never thought to find out why. Arthur would take her after that, she remembered, but he never did end up letting her go in past the stones. That boy was naive and foolish. The sea is dangerous, more than any one boy could have handled, and he almost got his little sister killed. That was really what he thought of her most cherished memory of him. He wouldn't change, she realized with a sigh. He was who he was. She started pulling her hand away, but he refused to let go. Still, he should have realized the girl would grow to be a woman. A woman he couldn't protect from the sea no matter how much he insisted she stay on the stones. He should have given her his hand to hold on to instead, even if he never understood her desires. Even if he thought she was stupid and reckless and selfish for it, even if he thought she could have avoided it all if she had just stayed on the stones, he shouldn't have let go. If the current swept them away, he shrugged. She squeezed his arm. It's never too late. A squeal of shock made them look down below. The children were having a snowball fight. Rob and John and little Ned against all the girls. Leia reminds me so much of you as a girl. Eerily, Ashura thought, though perhaps a little more charming and less fiery. When she and John were small and I had to get them to bed, I used to tell them how if they didn't listen to me and go to sleep as they were told, the Grumpkins would come for them in the night. I told them the story you and Arthur would tell me of how they would steal me away, and replace me with a new Ashura, and none of you would ever remember me because they used magic to enchant their victims' families. It used to work like a charm on John, he always believed every word I said. But Leia, she shook her head fondly, she didn't quite believe me. Still she went to sleep, or so I thought. But the next day I told them the same and she called me a liar and said she had stayed awake the whole night just to see a Grumpkin and nothing had come. Aaron bellowed out a laugh. A smarter version of you then, you'd never have thought to pull that off. What happened after that? Oh, she very nearly convinced John she was right too, but I realized she'd gone to stay awake in John's bed with him that previous night while he slept because a part of her was scared that Grumpkins would take her and she didn't want to be alone if they came. I told her she had tricked them once, as they had only sensed John being asleep, but it wouldn't work again. Grumpkins were too smart for that. And just as I said it, a branch slammed into the window and it freaked both of them out so much they admitted I was right and went straight to sleep. He seemed amused. You ought to thank the gods for the wind then. Jon Snow. I thought winter was over. Ally looked confused at the sight of flakes dropping from the sky. It is, his twin confirmed happily, these are just summer snows. Summer snows? That's awful. Leia frowned, no it isn't. The snow is fun. Jon saw a sly look take her face, come on. We will show you too. He saw her turn back and wink at him and Rob and he knew exactly what she was asking them to do. He exchanged grins with Rob as they crept behind the snow boulder, him still clutching Ned's hand and putting a finger over his lip, his cousin copying his symbol for silence. Rob had already started rolling snowballs together, and juggled one over to him with a smirk. Best not miss, Snow, he warned, or next time you will be rolling them and I'll be throwing them. Jon wasn't great at throwing, but he was more accurate than Rob. When Rob did hit someone though, it tended to hurt. There she was. He saw Ally standing at Sansa's side admiring the frost-covered tree, Arya a few feet away. Ned was looking at him curiously and he grinned, gesturing for the younger boy to stand and watch him. He took aim and released, relishing her shriek of surprise, as an indication of their success. He and Rob burst into laughs as a doubt tingled at his mind. Where was Leia? He fell with a thunk from the snowball hitting him fully in the face. He heard his sister's cackles from behind the snow covering that was freezing his eyes and chilling his nose, and when he finally cleared his line of sight he saw her taking aim once more, a smile dancing on her lips. Not this time, Lia. A rapid thrill of excitement overtook him as he spun out of the way, quick as a cat. He scooped up one of his own and returned fire, nailing her in the back. She gasped from the sensation, eyes glimmering, and he felt another pack of cold hit his ear from the side. Sansa, he thought with a shiver, his sisters were teaming up on him. Rob, Ned, help me, he yelled from under their barrage. He vaguely made out someone creeping behind his brother, and before he could cry a warning he saw Rob falling in a choked shock after Ally had shoved a fistful of ice down his back with a whoop. At the same time, he saw Arya take Ned to the ground, shoving his poor cousin's face into the snow. He ran behind the bushes to join them after their attackers had fled to replenish their weapons. They exchanged looks. The girls may have won the first battle, but this is war. They had decided to play knights and maidens, his favorite game, and it was time to choose which knight to be. For Jon, it was an easy choice, the same as every other time. "I'm Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning," he shouted before realizing in surprise his voice had an echo. A girl's echo. He turned around to find Ally looking in his direction with an equal amount of shock. "Sorry, sweet nephew, but a sister comes first in claiming rights," she told him with a broad smile. "But you are a girl," Rob blurted, confused, earning at least 3 pairs of skulls. "In Dawn, women can choose to fight as much as any man. I heard that was true of the North too," she shrugged, "but I suppose I was wrong." "Aunt Daisy fights," Arya contributed. "You aren't wrong," Jon admitted, and by her grin she looked as if she expected that. "Then how about we spar for it? Surely the better sword deserves to be the Sword of the Morning." "You can take her," Rob reassured. "You beat me more often than not." Jon wasn't so certain. Rob still managed to beat him in nearly half their spars, mostly thanks to his size and strength. And Ally was 13, nearly double their age, and easily both taller and stronger than him. "You can do it," Jon Lia told him brightly, and if anything that made him all the more doubtful. When his twin had that look of mischief on her face, nothing that came out of it usually ended up very good for him. The Sword of the Morning wouldn't be scared of any challenge, he emboldened himself. "Don't you remember what Mama said? The Master at Arms wasn't allowed to train girls at Starfall because Grandfather said so, and Uncle Aaron insisted on the same. You've been training with Sir Roderick since last year." That was true, he thought, finding himself further inspirited. The words had come from Mother herself. Surely even a year of training was enough to best any untrained opponent, no matter how much larger or stronger. "Ready. Set. Go," Rob judged, and they were circling each other. Her footwork didn't look like a beginner's, Jon frowned. But he leapt forward anyway, only for her to draw back and lay a painful thwack across his knuckles. "Ouch," he cried at the sting of wood. It was a lucky shot, it must be. But it wasn't. She twirled and parried out of every strike, and giving him a couple of her own till her final hit right into his stomach sent him falling back into the mud. Rob was staring at her, his mouth dropped in undisguised shock. "Still think girls can't fight, Stark?" He shook his head quickly and took a step back with a gulp. "Do all Dornish children learn to fight so well without any training?" Rob whispered to him harshly once she was gone, and Jon could only shrug incredulously. He may have been half Dornish, but he hadn't ever left Winterfell either. It didn't make sense. Mother never knew how to fight, and she was Dornish too. How had Ally gotten so good without any training? She must be a real prodigy, he thought, discouraged, like Uncle Arthur was. Ally reached down her arm with a wide smile on her face, and Jon grasped it gratefully as she helped yank him to his feet. "Well fought, nephew." He couldn't help mirror her grin. "Well fought, aunt." "Sorry, Jon," his sister smiled sweetly at his side. "I forgot to mention, Ally has been training since she was 7. Apparently Uncle Aaron changed his mind about the whole girls training thing." Well, that explained it, he thought, unable to help the relief at knowing he hadn't been outclassed by an amateur. "You ruined it, Lia," the older girl complained, though she didn't look very upset. "Just imagine if the future Lord of Moat Cailin and the future Warden of the North thought every Dornish girl with no training could fight as I. Arya Stark." She didn't like the blonde boy. It wasn't really his fault, she supposed, he was rather quiet. But John was her favorite brother. She already had to share him with Lai, Rob, Sangza and Bran, and now this boy wanted him too. And he called himself Ned. He couldn't be Ned, Papa was called Ned. You stole my papa's name, she had scolded. He only blinked at her uncertainly, before turning to John. They can both be called Ned. John had explained to her with a smile, like how Bran was named after our Uncle Brandon. Leia was named after our grandmother, and you after her mother. She had frowned, misliking it, but she accepted it since John was always right. Now they were playing knights and maidens, and she loved it. Leia, Sansa and Ned were the maidens. But not her. No, she was going to be a great warrior. Ally was Sir Arthur Dayne, John had picked Sir Aemon the Dragon Knight, and Rob was Daeron the young dragon. She was going to be greater than them all, and she just thought of the best idea. Arya scrambled up on the black rock, running her hand over the rough texture, and to her it might have even been scales. I'm Visenya Targaryen, she announced happily, waving Jon's wooden sword in hand. Bow to me before my dragon burns you. That's a rock, she heard Ned ask, genuinely perplexed. It's a game of pretend, stupid, she wanted to say. But then she heard Rob guffaw loudly at her. And then stupid Sansa, who always liked to make fun of her, and even Leia and Ally. They were all laughing at her, she thought angrily, her own siblings, all because of him. She felt her lip tremble despite her best effort. It's not fair. That was when she saw Jon bending down and crawling towards her on all fours until he finally stopped right by her rock, his purple eyes smiling up at her. What are you doing? She asked in confusion. I'm a dragon, he told her earnestly. What? You aren't a dragon, you are a wolf like me. Visenya rode one, didn't she? He grinned. It dawned on her what he was doing, and she loved Jon with all her heart then. Rob and Leia would tease him mercilessly for it, but he was doing it anyway, and she gave him a beaming smile. She did. Her dragon was Vigor, she reminded him before frowning. I don't want my dragon to be Vigor though. Jon should be a northern dragon, they were Starks after all. She remembered having to see Leia ride her pretty white horse from the stables, just because Arya wasn't old enough to join her yet. But now I don't need a horse, I will be riding a dragon, Leia. You can be Winter, like Leia's horse. But a dragon instead, she made sure to add so he didn't get confused. Winter the dragon, he confirmed, and she climbed atop his back. Fly, she ordered with a kick, and he growled, who should we eat first? She turned to face Ned, cackling in delight when she saw Jon do the same. And when they kicked off after the squealing boy, she felt as high as the trees, and when the wind blew on her face, it was like she was really riding a dragon. You're good with a sword, Ned told her with a small smile after they caught up to him, and she frowned. It didn't sound like he was making fun of her. You really think so? He nodded his head quickly. You are really fast. Faster than Ally even. But Ned's aunt got to train with a real master at arms. They won't let me train, she grumbled. Not here, but I'll go somewhere else when I'm big enough and train and become as good as Visenya Targaryen. You could visit Starfall, he offered shyly. Sir Grage is really good. He'd love to help you. Truly, she asked, astonished. He actually wanted to help her even if she had been less than welcoming to him. Of course. She pulled him into a hug. Thanks. Perhaps the next 2 weeks wouldn't so bad. The 2 weeks had gone by quite fast, by her count. And now it was time for the Danes to leave. She had decided she would miss Ned Dayne after all, even if hogged Jon's attention sometimes. Ever since that day he had offered to let her come to Starfall to learn to fight, she had allowed him to share her time with Jon, and he had never once laughed at her, and he was fun to play with. Ned, she saw him turn to face her. Jon said, you are going to ride to him and Leia every month from now on, she questioned, and he nodded in confirmation. Will you ride to me too? That seemed to catch him by surprise before he smiled wide. I'd be honored. Ashura Dayne. Auntie Ash, she turned to the voice, and smiled when seeing none other than little Arya Stark. Of all the Stark siblings, Ashura had found herself drawn to Arya the most. The girl was wild and fierce, but Ashura saw the doubts she held beneath too, how she seemed to struggle under the shadow of her older sisters. All the Stark siblings loved Jon and Lyra, she never doubted, but none quite so openly and without reservation as the littlest she-wolf. She'd never imagined seeing the girl of 5 actually stand up to her own mother and argue in her siblings' defense, not when Robb and Sansa tended to just stay quiet no matter how much they disagreed and simply ignore their mother's words. Yet it had happened nonetheless, and Ashura loved Arya all the more for it. She thought back to the first real conversation she'd had with the youngest of Ned's daughters. The girl had been watching her with inquisitive grey eyes. "Hello Arya," she greeted with a smile. "Jon says you wanted to talk to me. What do I call you?" Ashura found herself blinking in amusement at the child's bluntness. All the times she'd conversed with Robb when he'd come over looking for his siblings, and the few with Sansa, and they'd never thought to ask her that. "You can call me however you like, sweeterling. You are Jon and Lya's mama, but not my mama," she said hesitantly as if she didn't quite understand it. "And Jon and Lya are my brother and sister. So can you be my aunt?" How the girl had come up with that calculation she didn't have a clue, but it made her smile. "Of course. I'd be honored to be your Auntie Ash." The name had stuck, and ever since the rest of the Stark siblings had taken to calling her Aunt Ash as well, much to their mother's ire. "Do Papa and you love each other? Is that why you came here?" she'd continued, and Ashura saw Jon's eyes flick over to her curiously. "We were in love a long time ago," she replied. "But I'm here because I said something to the king once that he didn't like, and your papa stood up for me and saved my life. So the king punished him for it." That explanation seemed to appease the girl. "I am glad you are not dead," she said thoughtfully. "That would make Jon and Lya sad." "I am glad I am not dead either," Ashura had answered with a laugh. "Hello sweeterling," she greeted. "I saw you speaking with little Ned. Will you miss having him to play with?" The girl pursed her lips. "Can I tell you a secret?" "Of course. I'm going to go to Starfall when I'm older and learn to train with him." "Are you now?" Ashura grinned. She nodded seriously. "And Ned will write to me too." "Well, I'm sure you will be a fine warrior one day." She was standing with mixed emotions as she prepared to see her family off. The last 2 weeks had been invigorating to say the least. After many promises to write and tearful goodbyes, they had readied to depart, and her brother stepped forward for her to envelop him in one final hug. "Take care, sister. You as well. This time you will write, will you not?" "I will. And, if there is anything you ever need of me, Ashura, I wish for you to know I'd be glad to do what little I can manage." A sudden thought went to her head. She'd been worrying what to do of Moat Cailin for weeks now, and the solution had been staring at her the whole time. What was it her son had said? "I know you can't go home right now, so I thought I'd bring your home to you." Her smile grew at that. Aaron would be willing to lend use of his ships for just the gold it would take to maintain them, so they wouldn't need to worry of being trapped with only Mondalis draining off her. But perhaps there was even more she could do. If she was as well loved in Dorne as Rhalyna had claimed, it wasn't just her brother's ships she could use to keep Moat Cailin running for a year or two. She could use shipbuilders, merchants and small folk to fill his lands too. Jon needed men loyal to him. Where better than from Starfall? "Actually, there is something I could use your help with." Notes. Hey guys. Chapter 7 is in. Not very plot heavy this time, and a bit lighter in tone. Let me know what you guys think. As always, thanks for reading, commenting, kudos, subscribing or any other way you interact with his story. Chapter 8, Upside Down. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. 292 AC at Winterfell. Ashura Dayne. Too much had changed, she thought with a scowl. Raven had come from the south that Cersei Lannister had given the usurper another son. A second heir that had to be dealt with. And as if that were not enough, the Ironborn rebellion had only served in strengthening Robert Baratheon's once uneasy hold over the kingdoms instead of weakening it. The Westerlands, Stormlands, North, Riverlands and Reach had all answered the king's call to put them down, and even if some, like the Reach, still held no love for him, she knew it had just become far more of a mountain of a challenge to actively gain support against him. She had imagined that there wouldn't be a need to rush. That Jon could assume his lordship upon his majority, and spend years gathering allies while waiting for the right moment to strike. But she had miscalculated. She hadn't considered that some would start growing complacent with the new status quo. Power was where people thought it was, and now that the usurper seemed to project his control, it was he who held the power. It wouldn't do, she thought, not at all. The landscape had changed and they couldn't afford to wait. The sooner they struck, the better chance they had to regain those who still held to the dragons. Or those who were still nursing their wounds and dreaming of vengeance for their losses from the rebellion. The earliest would be once John was of age, once he turned 16. Any sooner and they would see only a boy, someone too young to follow, at least for any who were on the fence. Moat Cailin was still a half-year away from being fully functional, upon which Ben would immediately take over Castellan. It would give them over 6 years to hoard gold and resources which, while likely cutting it close for a war, still remained doable. But if that were to happen, John would have to be prepared at a far quicker pace than he was currently, and at a level that was far beyond the capabilities or knowledge of her weekly lessons alone. He needed to learn ruling, politics, settling land disputes, managing taxation, diplomatic correspondence and war, and all to the level of knowledge only a Maester could bring. Which brought her to her current situation. She liked Maester Luwin well enough, but that didn't mean she dared to trust him. Maester swore to serve whoever held the castle they were in, yet she hadn't forgotten how Luwin had come north from Riverrun with Caitlin. So she had written to Oberyn, knowing of his time at the Citadel, asking for his help in enlisting a Maester to her cause with required familiarity in said subjects and also preferably with a tin link. Mastery of languages. If John were to be a true Targaryen king, he ought to learn High Valyrian fluently. It had been the symbol of their ancestry after all. All in all, it was a tall ask, she knew. They were often a prickly, prideful bunch, and even the promise of the eventual seat as Maester of Moat Cailin would likely not be enough to persuade many to wait years as a glorified tutor. But if anyone could have come through, she told herself, it would be Oberyn. And much to her delight, he hadn't disappointed her, and Maester Aemon had soon made his way to Winterfell. Perhaps it had been dangerous, going right under Ned's nose instead of waiting a few years for the privacy of Moat Cailin, but it was a risk that had to be taken under the circumstances. Ned had questioned her far more intently than usual and was rather mystified until she had pacified him that Maester Luwin had done a good job with the basic education of all the children, and it was merely a sacrifice for the opportunity to get the best man for the job at the moat. Having handled that as smoothly as it could possibly be, the only worry left to her was what was to be done with her daughter. If she mentioned just a word to John that she would prefer he didn't divulge what he learned in his lessons to anyone, she had zero doubt his lips would stay sealed. But Lyra was a different matter entirely. That girl of hers was loose-lipped on the best of days, and even more, she absolutely adored her father. Lyra couldn't keep a secret away from Ned even if her life depended on it. Mix that with her steep dislike of studying in general and her stubbornness to ever put up with lessons silently, especially on topics that would seem so disconnected from the rest of what they learned, and Ashura knew it was only a matter of time before she spilled it all. Yet, she couldn't expressly tell Lyra not to join her brother either. The two of them shared everything together, and Ashura knew the older girl would get curious and start poking her nose into it sooner than later. Not to mention, being forbidden from something only made Lyra that much more likely to hunger in pursuit of it. She just needed to come up with something else. More lessons, her daughter exploded. No way. You already make us stick our heads in these books for 2 hours on top of studying with Maester Luwin. You will not make me sit chained to this room like some wrinkly, fat man who will die with sums and letters in his head. I won't do it, Mama, she declared mutinously. You think I was giving you a choice? I'm your mother. I'll go to father. Lyra challenged, and she stifled the urge to laugh. You really think Ned could save you from me? You poor thing. Fine, she barked instead. Go, if you wish. I don't have time to deal with your tantrums. Only those who want to listen to me will have to stay. Ashura felt a perfectly disguised smile grace her lips as her daughter skipped away happily while John was rooted to his spot. Still got it. The next day, after their normal lessons had finished, she finally addressed them. John, would you stay back please? I need to talk to you about those lessons we were discussing. She saw her daughter pin them with a curious look before bouncing away. This is Maester Aemon, she introduced the man. He is a friend, he will be your Maester at Moat Cailin, and he has kindly agreed to tutor you on some things that Maester Lewin might not have as much knowledge of. Things pertaining more to ruling. Couldn't father just show me with Rob? He asked slowly. She had been prepared for that. He will show you some things, I'm sure. But ruling Moat Cailin will not be like ruling Winterfell. It is a different land, with different things you must know. You will be trading with people from all over the world. You must know them all well. But the biggest constraint for you is time, I'm afraid. Rob can learn at his own pace, because Ned isn't going anywhere. But Moat Cailin's construction has nearly finished. Your Uncle Benjen will hold it in your name for a while, but I don't feel it's best to wait for your majority to take your seat. Jon nodded, still looking slightly hesitant. With my lessons with Maester Lewin, I'm not sure when to fit it in, he admitted. You don't have to worry about that. I know it will be a bit busier now, so I've already informed Sir Roderick you will not be continuing your extra training any longer. What? Her son yelped. No, I have to practice. I won't improve if I don't. You are already good enough with a sword, she said shortly. If you focus on your lessons you will learn how to win fights without ever having to pick up a sword. And you will still get to train with Rob and the others for over 1 hour like usual. I'm sure whatever he has to teach you can be taught then. Please, mother, he begged, I promise I will find time for all Maester Amun's lessons. But I can fit my training with Sir Roderick too. I know I can. You don't need to fight anyone yourself, she wanted to insist. You never will have need of a stupid sword. But he pleaded with her so desperately, she couldn't find the heart to deny him. Very well, she allowed finally, but don't let it interfere with your lessons. Lyras, no. Jon, come on. Rob shouted, we are taking Bran to the creek for the first time. Bran was such a lovely boy, she thought as he stood clutching tightly onto her leg. Her youngest brother had taken to following her around everywhere recently. Jon turned to them a little wistfully before his face fell. I can't. I have lessons. What are you talking about? She butted in. We just got out of lessons. Extra lessons, remember? Oh right, she realized. Was it time for those already? It had been 8 moons since he started the lessons with his new maester, and at first it had been tolerable. He would only avoid coming with them maybe once or twice. But these days it seemed every time they found him, he had no time to play. He was either busy training or studying. He's your maester, you know, so he has to obey you. And I won't tell mother if you don't, she suggested slyly, like always. But he shook his head resolutely as ever. No, it's all right, he finished abruptly. You guys should go have fun without me. She knew him too well to not know how that thought finished in his head, and it saddened her. But there would be no budging her twin. No matter how quiet and indulgent he normally was, Jon could be as stubborn as both mother and her when he wanted. It was in their blood after all, she thought. What could he possibly be studying for so long? The question bugged at her the entire time they played. She may have never cared to listen much, but Jon always normally told her what he learned. She had been thankful he had seemed to forget to fill her in about these, but it was clear now that he hadn't forgotten. He was just hiding it from her on purpose. Because when she had actually asked him to tell her what his lesson was about today, he had refused her. Which could only mean one thing: mother had asked him not to tell. Well, either that or it was really, really embarrassing. Either reasoning worked perfectly well for her. Lia. Ha. She ducked just in time before the filled sack could hit her in the face. What's wrong with you? You are supposed to catch it, not dodge it. Rob raged. We just lost again because of you. To 3 babies. Jon would have never done so bad. Normally she'd have thought of a clever retort to throw back at him, but she had another idea this time. You are right, I'm feeling a bit sick today, she fibbed. I think I'm just going to head inside now and get some sleep. Now she could finally find out what Jon was up to. Lia knew her twin's schedule like the back of her hand. He'd spend the morning with the Sound of Steel in the yard training with Rob and the other boys. Then he'd have his private lessons with Sir Roderick before finally meeting them for lunch. Following which she would join him for their lessons with Maester Lewin, and then he would leave for more with Maester Amun, the latter of which would assign him some work to be completed the next day once they had wrapped up, before then leaving him alone in the library. And he'd do so in about 3, 2, 1. The doors opened right on cue, she noted with satisfaction, and the older man strode out right past her. She walked in, taking care to ensure her footsteps were as quiet as expected, finally eyeing John sitting at a table writing on a piece of parchment. Only when she got close enough, did she realize she couldn't make out a word of it. "What's that say?" she blurted out, making John jump up in his seat, caught completely unaware by her presence. "It says Myrmidon's Engines of War. That's the name of the scroll. I have to translate it from High Valyrian to the common tongue." Mother was crazy, Lyra thought. How was learning about war or High Valyrian supposed to make John a better lord of Moat Cailin? Though when she voiced the thoughts, John wasn't as appreciative as he ought to have been at her support. "That's not the only thing I learn. Look," he pointed to a giant stack of books and scrolls. Taxation, land disputes, politics, diplomacy, the topics went on and on, covering not just the north and not even just the Seven Kingdoms but even beyond, and she found herself going dizzy at the thought alone of having to read them. He had been doing all that for the past 8 moons. Better you than me. For a moment all she felt was relief that she had managed to escape such torture. But then she felt a twinge of sympathy for her twin. "It's a mistake. You shouldn't have to do so much. We are in the north, why should you have to know all of what happens in the rest of the kingdoms? Because Moat Cailin will be a center of trade. I have to understand all of this, different customs and peoples, if I am to do what's best for the north. Mother doesn't make mistakes." That was so stupid it made her snort. "Of course she does." His eyes suddenly flashed in realization at what he was doing and he looked back to the time. "Go away, Lyra," he chased her off, annoyed. "You are just distracting me. If I keep talking with you, I won't finish in time and I'll have to skip dinner again." "Skip dinner?" She shook her head. "You are just a kid." "I'll get him out of this," she resolved. "Ashura. Why can't John come play, Mama? We are going to build a snow fort." She felt like pulling her hair in frustration, sick of her daughter's pestering. For over 1 month now, Lyra came to her at least once every day without fail in an attempt to guilt-trip her into letting John join her. "I've told you, Lyra, your brother has lessons to finish. The second he's finished, I'll send him over myself." "It's Lyra," the girl corrected, annoyed, "and why do you make him study so long anyway? One day soon, John will be Lord of the Moat. I'm making sure he's prepared for it. Robb will also be a lord someday and Warden of the North, and he gets even more free time than we do," her daughter continued dissidently. "Because Robb will not be king. Robb can take that up with his mother if he wants. John's extra lessons are so dumb. Who is he going to speak High Valyrian to? And why does he have to learn about the properties of dragons anyway? There aren't even any dragons alive." Ashura paused, her eyes narrowing. Had John told his sister, or had she been spying on him? She'd lean towards the second, but it hardly mattered, she decided. "Are you sure you don't want to join John's extra lessons?" she threatened. "I'm sure I can make room quite easily." "No," her daughter retreated before staring at her defiantly. "I'm just standing up for John since I love him. He doesn't even like his lessons either. Because I love him." As if she didn't. Oh, the nerve of this girl. "If your brother had a problem he would come talk to me." "Of course he wouldn't." Lyra rolled her eyes. "He looks at you like you hung all the stars in the sky yourself." A sudden doubt took her. Could it really be too much for him and he was simply keeping quiet? No, she shook her head. She still saw him train with Sir Roderick without fail every morning for hours on end, and she'd told him to cut those off if they were interfering with his studies, so clearly he had time if he needed it. Lyra was just being her usual melodramatic self. "Perhaps, you should take some pointers from him then. I am your mother. It is I who decides what you two will do, which is what I think is best for you, not what you want," she said, dismissing her daughter. "John may not like his lessons now, but one day he will appreciate them, as will you." Jon Snow. Lives of Four Kings by Grand Maester Keith. Mother had bought him a copy for his 8th name day, and she had happily informed him it nicely doubled as a reading material for his lessons as well. It was well written and informative, and he found himself enjoying it even if Jon didn't particularly like any of the Four Kings in it. First there was Daeronai, the young dragon. Robb loved him, and sure he was a great battle tactician, brave and a great leader besides. But how many tens of thousands of men did he send to his death? Only to still lose Dawn in under a fortnight and then get himself killed, meaning it had all been for absolutely nothing. The next up was Baylor the Blessed. Jon liked how charitable he was to the small folk, and a marriage alliance to Dawn had been a far smarter path to start amending that relationship. But he was more than a bit crazy, considering he locked away his own sisters to avoid their temptation and then ended up fasting himself to death. And he didn't even need to speak on Aegon the Unworthy. Daeron too was probably the best of the bunch. His marriage and marrying his sister Daenerys to Dawn had finally brought them into the fold. Though Mother had told him that was what led to the first Blackfyre rebellion, that the other kingdoms had felt Dawn was getting too much influence and that they had never liked how much better Dawn was than them. It was Daeron's eldest son and heir that Jon found himself liking the most. Baelor Breakspear. Jon thought he would have made a fine king, but he had died young from an accidental blow during a trial of 7. Instead it was Daeron's fourth son who had eventually taken the throne, and his fourth son after him, Aegon the Unlikely. What were the chances of that? He couldn't help but marvel. Jon, he saw Arya stumble over to his table. Wanna play snowballs with us? He couldn't play now. He still had to finish writing up 2 chapters of the aforementioned reading and then 3 chapters of land disputes of the Free Cities by the time he met with Maester Aemon tomorrow for his lessons. Mother had told him he could skip training with Sir Roderick from now on to make time for his extra lessons, but that was the one wish of hers he found he could never obey. He knew she had never liked seeing him with a sword, not after what happened to Uncle Arthur. You are good enough, she always told him, now you should focus on your lessons. If you do, you will learn how to win any fight without ever needing to pick up a weapon. But he just couldn't let it go. Truth be told, he didn't know how to tell Mother that he didn't really want to be Lord of Moat Cailin. Not really. He didn't mind his lessons, he quite liked them, in fact, at least when they weren't overwhelming him. But what he truly desired was to be a great knight just like Sir Arthur Dayne, to be the greatest swordsman in the realm. I can still do both, he insisted to himself, no matter how hard it was getting. He had been feeling more exhausted than ever the last few weeks. Arya grinned over at him so wide he could see her missing tooth, and her grey eyes shined with so much unbridled hope he found he couldn't refuse her. Of course, little sister, he agreed, taking the tiny hand she offered. I can study into the night, he decided. Arya had come again to get him the next day, and the day after that, and he had found himself falling more and more behind. He had to stay awake most of last night just to finally catch up. She would probably come again today. He excused himself from the library not soon after Maester Aemon left to get a drink of water before continuing with his work. Hey Arya, he heard his twin's voice ask, would you fetch Jon? He froze. Why hadn't he seen this coming before? He nearly groaned. Of course, this was Lya's doing. He should have known the moment she had suddenly stopped pestering him that it was her who sent their little sister in her place. You have to be japing with me, Lya. He made his dissatisfaction known once he had seen Arya leave. She spun around in shock at having been caught before giving him a little smile. Hey Jon, she said brightly, fancy seeing you here. Don't hey me, you know I can't refuse Arya, so you've been sending her to get me every day on purpose, he accused. So you can refuse me but not her, his sister sulked. I thought I was your favorite. You think I wouldn't come if I could, he told her exasperatedly. I just don't have time, Lya. You are not a lord. Not yet. You are just a boy, of course you should have time for playing, she countered angrily. Just stop. Let it go. I'll come for half an hour from now on, but then I'm done, he said, storming off. Jon. There you are, he woke up startled as Robb shook him awake. No, it was morning. He cursed, he had fallen asleep in the middle of working. Despite his insistence on the contrary to Lya, he still ended up spending most of his evenings with his siblings, and it had only made his tight schedule all the more unmanageable. But he found he couldn't help himself, not when they wanted him to join them so badly. Did you sleep here all night? Robb asked in disbelief. I wasn't supposed to, he murmured grumpily. What time is it? You missed our training with Sir Roderick, so I came to find you. He missed the whole thing. Did that mean it was 10 already? He got up shabbily. I have to go for my private training with Sir Roderick now. I'll apologize for missing it to him, he stammered, and I won't see you at lunch or after today. I have to finish this work before lessons start. Rob was frowning, as he shifted past him. Lie, I was right, he heard his brother mutter, you are overworking. Ned Stark. She was quiet today, he couldn't help but notice. It was unlike her. What's wrong, Lie? He finally demanded. It's mother, his daughter started, and he felt his worry recede. It wasn't an uncommon topic of complaint. Ashura works you hard, I know, but it's not me, it's John. She's working him too much. You know how much John loves to read, and even he can't handle it. He took in her words, thinking of how to comfort her. Please, Papa. You have to stop her. You have to.